IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown podcast. Ryan Roberts here, Director of Recruiting at irishbreakdown.com. Breaking it down on a Thursday. It's a solo show today for me. I know I haven't been around all week. It's been a turbulent time in the Roberts household, I guess would be the best way to put it over the last few days. Can get into the specifics about it if you guys are really interested. I don't know if you totally are, though, but it's been a little bit of a tough few days, but Ryan is back, and I hate talking to myself in the third person, but I'm excited to be back on this podcast today, doing a solo show, because I'm going to talk about one of the things that have been probably the most exciting things we've seen this offseason so far, and that's the transfer portal for Notre Dame, because before the 2023 season, we saw Notre Dame go into the transfer portal, but there has been hesitation for different reasons. One is obviously the difficulties that Notre Dame can just have to get some players to Notre Dame, the academic hurdles that you have to go across, whether it's a undergraduate transfer and how far they are into their course load and those different things. And then obviously the NIL side of things as well, or the pay for play is what we should be calling it. But Notre Dame still had some really key pickups before the 2023 season. I mean, you talk about what Javonte Jean-Baptiste was able to give to Notre Dame, Thomas Harper, Sam Hartman. There was a lot of positives to what Notre Dame was able to pluck out of the portal last offseason. But this class, I think Notre Dame has really elevated its game from a transfer portal perspective. And I am really, really excited to talk about the portal additions that Notre Dame has had. We could also talk about some of the guys that are leaving Notre Dame, and it was more about depth and opportunity to play in most of those cases. But we're going to break it down offensively, defensively. What do those classes look like from the transfer portal perspective? And I'm going to go a little deeper, though, because I'm going to take it player by player, and I'm going to talk about setting expectations for each player. Because what I think we need to understand is, one, what is the low end expectation or the baseline expectation for a football player? What can you expect when Riley Leonard and the other great players that Notre Dame was able to get out of the portal this year? What is the low end expectation? Like, what do they bring to the team on a baseline and a foundational perspective? But then there's another conversation that needs to happen of, what if it hits? And you hear this all in our recruiting podcast a lot. There is a film grade on a player, and then there's an upside grade on a player. And I think that we need to talk about both of those conversations, because one, setting expectations is establishing a floor. But then the high-end expectation is where you kind of let your mind go a little bit and say, if this guy hits a ceiling, if this guy takes a nice step, if he's developed properly, put in the right position, then you can do X, Y, and Z with them, and that could take your program to even greater heights. So I'm going to break that down player by player. We're going to do 3 segments today. First segment, we'll be specifically talking about the offensive transfer portal class for Notre Dame. I'm also going to be talking about the defensive transfer portal class in the second segment of the podcast. And then third, you all have already been throwing in a lot of great mailbag questions into the chat. I will get to as many of them as I possibly can in that segment. I need you all to do me a favor, though. No production on the back end right now. It is just me, solo show. So if you could just put a mailbag, the word mailbag, or an MB before the question, that would be greatly appreciated. It helps me to maintain my focus. I have ADHD. But also be able to find the mailbag questions very, very quickly. So make sure to mailbag questions at any point in this podcast. We'll get them starred. We'll get them answered. And we will talk Notre Dame football today. So let's talk about the offensive class, folks. Obviously, there was a lot of great conversation about Notre Dame's offensive haul, because there's been a great debate about, the future of the quarterback position and what you're going to do and developing from within and what positions are you potentially targeting overall. And let's break down, first and foremost, what were the needs offensively? Because I'm going to start each segment here with, what did you need to do in the portal if you're Notre Dame? Because I think there is a clear. I would argue, actually, I wouldn't even argue it. I think it's pretty common sense, but like there is a position that we'll talk about that there was an absolute need for Notre Dame to hit the portal because they didn't have numbers. They didn't have numbers. They didn't have production. That's talking about the wide receivers. And then there's another position like quarterback, for instance, where did Notre Dame need to go to a quarterback? Didn't they need to go to the portal for a quarterback to come in and necessarily be the starter in 2024? I think you could have made the argument against it. You could have said, Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, Steve Angeli, fight it out, and you bring in a depth piece to just be a guy to hold a clipboard. You could have made that argument, but obviously Notre Dame did not see it quite that way. So we're going to talk about a luxury versus a need in this conversation as well. But let's talk about where Notre Dame was able to hit in the offensive class. And of course, actually they got 4 players in the class. And I'm actually going to pull up a screen just so you all can see the positions, the players that Notre Dame was able to get in this class. So I'm talking about the left side of this screen if you're watching me on YouTube right now. So Notre Dame was able to get 4 players out of the transfer portal on the offensive side of the football so far. And by the way, we'll see what happens if Notre Dame is active in the portal after spring, before the season. It's always possible that there's more added to this list eventually. But as of right now, 4 transfer portal offensive players in the class. We have 1 quarterback, Riley Leonard, grad transfer, well, not undergraduate transfer, excuse me, out of Duke. We have Chris Mitchell, wide receiver out of Florida International, over 1,100 yards this past season for the Panthers down there. We also have Bo Collins, former high caliber 4-star recruit at Clemson, at over 500 yards this year for the Tigers. And Jaden Harrison, who's a wide receiver kick returner out of Marshall, who was an All-American, has 3 kickoff return touchdowns in his career. So 2 positions Notre Dame covered in the portal offensively. And I think that those were the most pressing needs, and pressing needs for different reasons though, right? Wide receiver was the easy need. It was the easy need because you had a little bit of an exodus. I'm not going to call it mass exodus because I think that Notre Dame ended up actually being in a pretty good position after the fact. But Notre Dame needed to go get wide receivers in the portal because you lost Chris Tyree to the transfer portal. You lost Tobias Merriweather. You lost Rico Flores. You lost Braylon James. You were down numbers. You lost 4 guys from players that could have potentially come back in 2024. So you needed to be able to go into the transfer portal and get numbers. Notre Dame did that first and foremost. So they filled the need from a numbers perspective because not only did you bring in 3 transfer portal wide receivers, you were also able to get guys like Jaden Thomas to come back, get guys like Deion Colsey to come back for that veteran depth. And you're also going to bring a 3-man wide receiver class in the 24 recruiting class. So Notre Dame is in a good spot when we're simply talking about getting numbers on board, getting numbers into the wide receiver room. And I want to talk more specifically about these wide receivers because I'm going to talk about Riley Leonard second in this podcast or second part of this first segment, because he is more of a luxury for Notre Dame, but a luxury that could end up being substantial, could end up being a needle mover. But I want to talk about wide receivers because that was the most pressing issue for them in this year in this class. And Notre Dame obviously hit those numbers, but now let's talk more specifically about the players they landed. Obviously, the first wide receiver that they got to commit to them in the transfer portal was Chris Mitchell out of Florida International. 6'1", 170, 175 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark, probably closer to 6 foot, but I'm just going by the listed number right now. He is the older brother of John Mitchell, who, if you guys listen to the recruiting hour, if you just pay attention to Notre Dame recruiting in general, Notre Dame was going after his brother out of Mandarin High School down in Florida that signed with Penn State. And obviously that means we can, put one and one together. Chris Mitchell is also a Florida kid originally, also from Mandarin High School as well. And he brings a dynamic that I think that we need to talk about specifically. And I'm going to pull down this screen now because I think it might be affecting my internet. Hopefully the internet comes back a little bit better. Let me know, y'all, in the chat, because again, it's just me. Internet going okay. Connection's going okay. Someone said that it might be a little bit Oh, it's clear for someone. So maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's their internet. I don't know. But either way, let's talk Chris Mitchell, guys, and let's talk. And I'm going to get this back up because I think it's important. So Chris Mitchell, wide receiver out of Florida International. Let's talk about what the expectations are. Okay. We're going to talk about what the expectations baseline should be. And then let's let our imagination go. I want to hear from you guys in the chat as well. I have over 200 people already in the chat early in this chat. And I want to hear about what you guys are excited about as well, right? Like, I don't want to talk at you. I want to have a great conversation in the chat as well. Talk to me about what you're excited about with Chris Mitchell. For the people that have watched a little bit of his film, have read about our reports on him, heard just kind of the early, indications of him. Let's talk about what you all are excited about. What's the high-end expectation for Chris Mitchell? But let's set the baseline first. Notre Dame needed to get outside receivers in this class. They needed to get them. Because when you look at what they had coming back next year, there's a lot of guys who are really I'm excited about Jaden Greathouse. I'm excited about Jordan Faison. I'm really excited about Jaden Thomas if he's able to stay healthy. I love a lot of what Notre Dame has from a proven production coming back in terms of talent. But I think the thing that you need to talk about is how does this wide receiver room fit together? And that was the clunkiness of what the room could be going forward, is that you have a lot of guys that kind of work mostly from the inside. They're more slot options. They're guys that kind of feast more with open space and being smart football players, know where to sit down against zone, maybe don't have the biggest size of all time. So it's kind of a little bit of a hindrance to play outside exclusively. So Notre Dame needed to get some outside oriented players. They need a little bit of length. They need a little bit of speed. And I think immediately, what's the baseline for Chris Mitchell? What's the worst case scenario? He gives you a healthy body outside that was productive, over 60 receptions last year for Florida National, over 1,100 yards. And also, he gives you an outside oriented football player who brings speed to the table and explosiveness to the table. This is a legitimate 4-4 athlete that can play outside the numbers. He's going to be more of the Z receiver in this offense, so the field outside receiver, because he's not the strongest guy of all time. He's only 170, 175 pounds. That he's got kind of that lanky frame. So you're not going to throw him into the boundary a ton to work against press man and just more big physical corners. You're going to ask Chris Mitchell to utilize his speed and work to the field a ton, which immediately that met the need. At worst, he is a player that gives you an outside element of speed and athleticism and can win down the fields, just in theoretically. Now let's talk about the upside, because I want to get excited, man. It's the offseason can get so boring sometimes, guys, and you just want to get excited, right? And it's okay to be excited. I promise you, it's okay to be excited. So what's the high end? The high end for me, twofold. One, if I asked you all, and again, throw it in the chat. I want to hear from you all. Is there a chance? Well, actually, let me phrase the question this way first. Who is the most likely player, in your opinion? I'm talking to you all, the listeners out there live with me on YouTube. If I had to ask you right now, gun to your head, who's the leading receiver for Notre Dame in 2024? Who's the leading receiver? Who's the guy that you would say, that guy's going to lead this team in receiving yardage? He's going to be the dude for this offense. He is going to be the guy that creates the big plays, the explosives. Where is it? Who is it? I'm seeing Bo Collins in the chat already. I saw Chris Mitchell a little bit ago, kind of when I was introing the question. I imagine that some people are going to say Jaden Greathouse. I imagine some people might say Jaden Thomas if he's able to stay healthy, because he was their number one receiver going into the year. I saw a Jordan Faison. I just saw another Jaden Greathouse. I'm seeing a lot of different answers, right? And that is what is so exciting, but also not troubling. Troubling's not the right word. The word is just you're interested in it, right? It piques your interest. You're interested to see who is the guy that ends up being the number one receiver. Do you need a number one receiver? Might even be a better question. Is there a guy that you look at and say he needs to be the guy, or else this offense isn't as good? And my question is, and I saw a couple people already had this answer, could Chris Mitchell be the top receiver for Notre Dame in 2024? Could he be? I think it's possible. Look, if I was a betting man, my personal answer would probably be Jaden Greathouse. That would be the guy I would bet on. But I think that there is a reality where it's Chris Mitchell. There is no other wide receiver on this roster that was more healthy, or I'm sorry, more productive in 2023 than Chris Mitchell. Yes, it was in a group of five level. It was Florida International, but we're talking about a 4-4 athlete that was able to have that production and has pretty good release packages. Then why can't it be Chris Mitchell? And then my next question to you all, and I really want us to expand this a little bit, right? Is that Chris Mitchell is not the type of wide receiver for Notre Dame that we have typically seen them be the number one receiver for an offense. It's been twofold over the last few years. One is a boundary receiver. You talk about the Chase Claypools of the world. You talk about Miles Boykin. You talk about those big body guys, Javon McKinley a few years ago. Typically, Notre Dame is kind of run offensively, passing game wise, through the boundary position. And then we saw Notre Dame over the last couple years. We talked about the tight end position. You talk about, and it even happened this year too. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Michael Mayer was the dude for 2 years for Notre Dame, was the absolute dude. And then this year, who was the best receiver or the best receiving option in the time that he was able to be available for Notre Dame, most efficient? It was Mitchell Evans. It was Mitchell Evans. If Mitchell Evans was healthy for a full year, based upon what we saw from him in the 7 games he played and almost 500 yards he had, I think it was Mitchell Evans. He would have been the number one receiver, number one pass catcher, I should say, for Notre Dame in 2023. So we have seen boundary receivers be the number one. We have seen tight ends over the last few years be the number one. Now, if the high end reality is that Chris Mitchell ends up being the number one receiver or the top receiving option for Notre Dame in 2024, that completely changes the dynamic of what we have seen from Notre Dame from a passing game perspective. Who is the last outside field receiver, the Z receiver position now, what it's called, which is what it always should have been called, but that's a conversation for another day. When's the last time that Notre Dame had that outside-oriented field receiver be the top receiving option on the team? It's been a few years, guys. It's been a few years. I would say the last one is Will Fuller, right? That's the last one. Notre Dame hasn't had that dynamic a ton. They have had boundary receivers. They've had tight ends. They haven't had a ton of Z receivers, a ton of outside vertical-oriented field guys that are just that guy in their offense, the main player that you're going to look for to make that big of a jump. So after that, so if that does happen, right, this offense completely changes. We might be seeing a distribution and a change in philosophy offensively from a passing game perspective. Mike Denbrock coming in. It's a new era now offensively. You're going to see Mike Brown come in and work with these wide receivers. If Chris Mitchell becomes the outside-oriented receiver, then maybe that takes a little bit of, because why was it so unsettling last year? And someone just made a great point. Who was Will Fuller's offensive coordinator? Right. Right. Yes, exactly. Mike Denbrock worked a lot with Will Fuller. What made us unsettled last year was we knew that we had nobody as fans that you could throw into the boundary that was a difference maker, because you were dealing with so many injuries and you didn't have that guy that would really just be able to strike the fear and the number one corner on a team. You just didn't have that guy in the boundary. Well, what if I told you you don't necessarily need that guy to be your top receiver? You don't necessarily need him to be number one. If Chris Mitchell is able to create those mismatches, work vertically, create big plays, and that boundary position becomes more of a, hey, you now have single coverage all the time. You need to win some back shoulders. You need to win some comebacks, maybe an occasional go ball, and you just need to be a good complementary weapon. Then that changes the dynamic of the offense. I'm not necessarily saying that's what's going to happen. I just want us to start to think of a world where, hey, this offense might look a little different, man. this might be different because you have a new guy calling offensive plays. You have a wide receiver coach that has a pretty good track record of developing wide receiver talent. And you have a couple guys coming in, Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins specifically, that brings something different than what you had in 2023. You just didn't have it. What would have what a blessing it would have been down the stretch in 2023 if you would have had a Bo Collins that you could have thrown into the boundary. When everyone's hurt, everyone has a hamstring issue, you don't have a guy that's a real true boundary receiver. If you could throw a guy like a Bo Collins into the boundary last year, would have made Notre Dame's offense so much better. Luckily, there is a Bo Collins, and we'll get to him in a second as I take a little sip of my coffee. So Bo Collins, as I mentioned, graduate transfer. Actually, he's an undergrad as well out of Clemson. Let's set the baseline expectations now for Bo Collins. And I know a lot of people out there are super excited about Bo for a couple different reasons. One, actually, probably three reasons, I guess. You saw him at Clemson this past year. He actually had a pretty good game against Notre Dame. He had a couple where he got Benjamin Morrison turned around twice on specific routes. He was a big time recruit. He was the leading receiver at Clemson the last couple years. And also, he had a pretty good showing against Notre Dame. So you know who Bo Collins is at this point. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you should. At least you saw him in the game, if nothing else. If you don't have like deep understanding of his recruiting profile and his career at Clemson, you did see him at Notre Dame, obviously. What does Bo Collins bring to the table for Notre Dame? Bo Collins, as a baseline for Notre Dame, gives you something that I just hit on that you didn't have enough of or you didn't have any of at certain times in 2023. You didn't have a guy that had requisite size and athleticism to consistently win in the boundary against man-to-man coverage. Didn't have it. There were at times in 2023 where you were throwing Jaden Greathouse into the boundary. Guys, he's not a boundary receiver, at least not right now. I think that he can be. I think that he can be that de facto boundary guy who's just going to win back shoulders. But Jaden can win with size. He can win with physicality. He can win with great hand play. He can win with nuance, but he's not a burner. He's just not. That's never going to be his game. And then you also obviously lost Deion Colsey early in the year. He's kind of your best option just from a height, weight, speed perspective. I mean, he's a 6'5" kid that can run pretty well. He can kind of threaten vertically a little bit more than like a Jaden Greathouse can. But Jaden Thomas is kind of the similar mold of what I just said about Jaden Greathouse. Not great speed. He's very nuanced. He's very flexible. And he's really strong and physical. He can do some things into the boundary. But on a full-time basis, I'm just not sure you had enough of that in 2023. Notre Dame, luckily, with Bo Collins, at worst, you're going to get an experienced veteran player that has played in the boundary, has had production in the boundary, and has shown that you at least need to account for him. He has been on a ACC team, because that's one concern that people have with Chris Mitchell, and I totally get it, right? Is that Chris Mitchell is making a pretty nice little competition jump. Going from Florida International up to Notre Dame, that's a jump. Going from Clemson to Notre Dame, obviously, that's not much of a jump, right? You're going from one very good program to another very good program. Notre Dame should be able to. Oh man, some of these questions are already funny. Chris, I'll get to that one, man, because I have a fun relationship with that one. But you now have a guy that's not making a huge jump in competition. I think the baseline for Bo Collins is very easy. He's 6'3", he's 210 pounds, he's physical, pretty athletic, he has experience playing in the ACC. He's been there, done that. Chris Mitchell's a little bit more volatile. He's a little bit more volatile in the sense that I think the low end and the high end are a little bit spread apart, right? I think he could be really good, but he could also just be a good player, just a solid player. Bo Collins, I think, brings a higher floor in the sense that you know what Bo is going to be. At worst, he's going to be a good body in the boundary. Doesn't mean that he'll be a 1,000-yard receiver. Doesn't mean he'll be an 800-yard receiver. Doesn't mean he'll be a 600-yard receiver. I don't know exactly what the production will be for Bo Collins, but at worst, he's the player that you look at and say, I know that he belongs on the field at Notre Dame. Like, he belongs there. He gives you a big body and consistency. Because although he never hit his ceiling at Clemson, he was a consistent player over the last couple years, man. Like he really was. When he was healthy, he was pretty productive. He was pretty productive. So that's the baseline is that you're getting experience, you're getting a veteran, you're getting a guy that has been there on the highest level and played in some big football games during his career at Clemson. So that's what you're getting with Bo Collins. Now, the upside's interesting because I think we fall in love with recruiting rankings too much, but the recruiting ranking for Bo Collins, and I do agree with this, is that Bo Collins had a lot of upside to his game. He had a whole lot of upside because he is big, long, pretty fast, athletic. He's an athletic kid overall. That's why he was rated as high as he was. That's why he had as many great suitors as he was. He's a St. John Bosco kid originally, obviously, and he was ultra productive at St. John Bosco. So my question to you all, and again, would love the feedback in the chat. Would absolutely love it. Please, if you're following us live on YouTube. How good do you think Bo Collins could be? And you could cite that as expectations. You can cite that as a role, clear number one receiver, very good number two receiver. He goes for 1,000 yards. He's 800 plus. He's more of a Miles Boykin type of player. You know, what are the expectations for Bo Collins? What are you expecting of him? What are you expecting? Because I think there's a world where Bo Collins is your top receiver in 2024. But the cool part about the Bo Collins pickup is although the upside is still tremendous there to be that type of player, at worst, you know what you're getting. At worst. And I think that you needed to be able to, and this is my opinion, if you guys agree with this or disagree with it, I would love to hear it also because this is a great conversation. Is I think in the wide receiver additions on this roster from the portal, you needed a good combination of known commodities and guys maybe with a little bit more upside to be a dude, right? And I think Bo brings a little bit of both, but also Chris Mitchell is a little bit more of a, I won't say boomer bust, but he's a little bit more of that guy that could either be a stud or he can just be, he's fine. He's a body. But Bo, I think, could either be a really good football player or he could just be a good player, right? Like, I just don't think there's as much volatility there, which is great. And I think that you needed that type of player as well. It couldn't have just all been, hey, we're going to go after these three guys. They don't have any production, but they're super talented. They're ultra productive. I mean, not ultra productive. They're super talented. They have high upside, but they don't have a floor. They don't bring a floor to the table. And I don't think that you can live that way. You can't. Because as someone just said, like you need a guy that can be a clutch player in the big moments. And that doesn't have to be your number one receiver. It doesn't. He could be a very good complementary weapon. He could be a really good complementary third receiver. Because he's going to block. He's going to run routes. He's going to be big and physical. I think the baseline of Bo Collins is my favorite part about his game. And the fact that he still has some untapped potential, I think that's what gets you kind of excited, man. So you have your field outside receiver in Chris Mitchell. You have your boundary receiver in Bo Collins. You upgraded the outside positions without question. There was like you did it. You did that. Also counting Cam Williams coming in, also counting Micah Gilbert coming in as true freshmen. So you now have 4 new bodies that can play outside of the numbers, which I think was big time for Notre Dame. They needed to be able to do that in this class, and they did that. They did just that. Now let's talk about the interesting addition, the one that kind of took us off guard. I mean, honestly, we had no idea that this player was even on Notre Dame's radar until he committed. And that's Jaden Harrison, 5'11", 190 pounds, wide receiver out of Marshall. Over 400 yards receiving this past season for Marshall, was actually their leading receiver on an offense that was not the best throwing team of all time. If you can tell by that stat, they just were not. Jaden Harrison, though, might bring the best baseline of any player that I've talked about so far. Why? He is an All-American kick returner. All-American. And Jaden Harrison, at worst, you want to talk about the baseline, is that he is going to give you 2 things. One, he's a really good kick returner. He's going to be able to return kicks, no doubt. 2, what does that do for you? It also makes it so that Jadarian Price maybe doesn't have to return as many kicks. And although it's exciting, and he took one back to the house this year for Notre Dame, and you love to see it, also you look at being able to save some wear and tear on Jadarian Price and be able to let him focus on the running back position. That's a really fun concept for me. Because you look at the 2-back punch, also talking about guys like Jabron Payne as well. But the two back punch of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, if he's able to really stay focused on the running back position and being the best player that he can be from an upside perspective, uh, I really think that allowing him to do that is really impressive and really opportune for this offense on the next level. So Jane Harrison has a chance to take a little bit of that of that wear and tear off of his body potentially, that off of his plates potentially, and that is the baseline that he brings. A known commodity as a really good kick returner that has that type of upside and brings that type of upside to the table. Now, what is the upside of Jaden Harrison as far as what can he ultimately bring all around as a football player? It's a little bit untapped, I think. It's a little bit of an unknown. Because I look at Jane Harrison and I say, he was on a struggling offense, but you look at just kind of the reps that he does have, and he could be a really nice space player for Notre Dame. In a role that Notre Dame has had to a degree, but they've needed over the last couple of years to get more and more of it. And they are getting more and more of it. Because you talk about now, you talk about Jordan Faison coming in and showing what he did as a true freshman. You talk about Logan Saldate coming in. You talk about a couple of these young slot receivers that have the ability to win in space and create some explosive plays. You needed more of that dynamic. And will Jaden Harrison be any type of contributor in the slot for Notre Dame other than just a body on a 3D potentially? I have no idea. I have no idea. I assume that they bring him in with the idea that he will be able to help in some capacity offensively. But the great thing is that that's just an added bonus. If Jaden Harrison comes to Notre Dame and he's just a really good kick returner and he never catches a single pass for Notre Dame, it's fine because you added a dynamic to a third of the game that you need in certain moments. We have seen Notre Dame teams get jump started by big kick returns, big kick return for touchdowns. It has happened. So having a Jane Harrison that can flip the momentum of a game on one touch a game, special teams wise, is big for Notre Dame. The ability to create great field position for an offense. That is huge for this team. And anything else he gives you in the passing game is nothing more than a bonus for this Notre Dame offense. So Jaden Harrison, I think, is a just really good pickup for Notre Dame because he, at worst, is going to be able to take some reps off of a Jadarian Price, give you a good kick returner, and give you just a really good baseline of special teams value to the next level. So I'm actually really excited about that one, man. I really am. There are, there's always going to be a couple pickups that you're just kind of like, I don't really know what to expect. And you could say that about Jaden Harrison as a wide receiver, but I'm excited to see a all-American kick returner at Notre Dame, a guy that has 3 kickoff return for touchdowns in his career. I think that that's pretty exciting. So Jaden Harrison, that's the wide receiver position, folks. Again, I wanted to save Riley Leonard for the second part of this conversation because the wide receiver position was an absolute need in this class. You needed to be able to hit on numbers with where you are with the 4 members that entered the transfer portal and then also Matt Salerno obviously exhausting eligibility this offseason. You need to bring in wide receiver numbers just from a depth perspective. Quarterback wise, there was a reality where Notre Dame brings in a grad transfer quarterback that is just good holding the clipboard for a year, trying to get his master's degree at Notre Dame or whatever, or start a graduate course at Notre Dame. And you roll with the 3 young cats that you have in the quarterback room, that being Steve Angeli, that being Kenny Minchie, that being CJ Carr. You could have rolled with that. Riley Leonard is more of a luxury for Notre Dame. They took an opportunity to add a quarterback to the room. They had the opportunity to bring a quarterback into the room that brings you a dynamic that you just haven't had at Notre Dame in some time. Notre Dame hasn't had a dual threat level quarterback to the degree of a Riley Leonard in quite a few years at this point. Like you had a little bit with Tyler Buckner when he was healthy in certain games. Otherwise, you have had more standard pocket quarterbacks for the last couple of years. The most successful quarterbacks they've had has been Jack Cohn, has been Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman could do a little bit, outside of structure, but for the most part, those are pocket passers who just function from inside of structure a whole lot more than they're going to function outside of structure. Notre Dame wanted something different from a quarterback in this portal class. They wanted a player that brings a dynamic that they just don't have. They don't have. Because Kenny Minchie's a good athlete, guys. He can make something happen when things break down in the pocket. CJ Carr can do a little bit of the same stuff. Steve Angeli can do a little bit of the same stuff. But none of those guys are going to be a 700-yard, 13 touchdown rusher potentially for a team if they needed him to be. They just aren't that type of athlete. Riley Leonard is different in the sense that he is a pocket kid, but he's also a design run kid. He also can make things happen outside of structure when things break down. He's just a different dynamic. But let's talk about baseline for Riley Leonard. Okay, baseline. And this is assuming that Riley Leonard stays healthy. I don't really want to talk about the health stuff because, again, we're going to talk about it all off season, and it's a conversation, of course. But Riley Leonard, in his last 7 years of playing football, quarterback, and that's talking about high school level into college now for 3 years before this, he's had one season where he's been banged up. One. Never missed a game in high school. Didn't miss a game as a true freshman for all the games they needed him to come into. And then he was healthy fully his 2022 season. So I understand the hesitation. I understand the questions. But injury prone, I hate that terminology, especially with Riley, because there's no proof that he is actually injury prone. Injury prone means that it keeps happening over and over again. He had an injury riddled season. Could it start? Sure. But I am assuming that Riley Leonard is going to stay healthy. So assuming that Riley Leonard stays healthy, what are your baseline expectations? And again, I'm talking to you guys. I'm actually talking out loud as well, because this is my baseline expectations. At worst, if Riley Leonard is healthy, I think you're going to get the 2022 version of Riley Leonard. Baseline. At worst. Through 20 touchdowns, and again, I'm not talking about stat baseline. I'm not saying that these are exactly going to be his stats at worst. What I'm saying is that he was a very good dual threat quarterback in 2022. 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 13 rushing touchdowns, 33 total touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. Like, very good baseline. Because he brings a dynamic that Notre Dame hasn't had. I mean, Sam Hartman just had 27 total touchdowns. Riley Leonard had 33 total touchdowns last year on a less talented Duke team, on a team that needed him to be a dude. That's the baseline, right? Is that I think that he brings a dynamic that Notre Dame hasn't had. And that dynamic will be a little bit of it'll be a welcomed addition, I think. Because someone just said chain mover in the chat. And I think that he is a player that at worst will be able to get you out of some trouble at times. He'll be able to get you out of some trouble. When you need a first down, when there's a broken play, I think he'll be able to make some plays happen. That's the baseline. Now, what's the upside? And I know that there's a very wide opinion of Riley Leonard. Very wide. Some believe that Riley Leonard is not that guy, that he's going to be a bust, that, whatever, that type of stuff, right? Then there's other people that love the Riley Leonard pickup, and they look at him and say, man, there's some untapped potential there, folks. You look at him and say, if he is 2022 version plus a step up, then is he an elevator? And I would argue that he is an elevator if he is able to stay healthy. If he's able to stay healthy, I believe that he's not just a player that's a part of the machine. He's not just a player that could be really good if everything's functioning well around him. That he could be a player that can make something out of nothing and can lead you to big game victories when you need him most. An elevator is what I believe that he can be. Again, we're talking about two different realities. This is why we're talking about a baseline, is we're talking about an upside. Because if I just sat here and said, I believe that Riley Leonard is going to win the Heisman and he is going to elevate this team to a national championship, he's going to throw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns and run for another 10, that would be me just talking about one version of what could happen. Because we know that there were a lot of ifs with this thing, right? Can he stay healthy? Does the offensive line play well? Do the wide receivers step up? Is the offensive play calling as good as we think it's going to be? There are a lot of things that are going to go into this conversation of how good Riley Leonard is. There's going to be a lot. But I believe that he has that type of upside, guys. before the injuries ensued with Riley Leonard, he was being talked about, and I will say this legitimately talked about. I'm not talking about draft Twitter pumping him up, legitimately talking about him leaving school early and becoming a first round pick potentially. That was on the table, and it was legitimate. This wasn't a, you know, average Joe talking about this off to the side at a, at a bar, like, oh man, that guy's pretty good. Maybe he's a sleeper. Like, no, like there was legitimate conversation about it. I think someone just said, yeah, someone just said in the chat, Mel Kiper had him rated as his third ranked quarterback. And say what you want about Mel. I respect Mel because I'm an NFL draft guy and he's the godfather. But Mel's information that he puts out there comes from the NFL, right or wrong. It comes from the NFL, a lot of it. A whole lot of his rankings come from the NFL. So there was legitimate buzz there. And I think that he was going to put together a great season for Duke last year if he was able to beat the injury bug, because things were going to get rolling down the stretch. I truly believe that. Because at worst, I think he was going to be 2022 version. 2023 version, I think could be something special. I believe it, man. Like 35 plus touchdowns potentially, 3,000 plus yards passing, could have another 500 rushing. Like this kid could be the best dual threat quarterback Notre Dame has had in some time. It could be. But the key thing is that you have the ability here to look at Riley Leonard and say, if he can stay healthy, he has the chance to at least give you a different dynamic that team people just haven't seen at Notre Dame, just haven't seen it at the quarterback position. And at its best, he could be a difference maker. Absolute difference maker. I believe that. I believe that he has that upside and that potential. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Ultimately, it'll be about what can he accomplish this offseason. It's going to be huge for him, man, because we talk about just the transition to Notre Dame from a foundational person perspective. This is a young man who's an undergraduate. He's still going to be going through his course workload early on at Notre Dame. He's going to be acclimating as a student. He's going to be acclimating as a person. And he also needs to win over this team really quickly. He needs to be able to show that he is the leader. Because I know there's some people out there that are yelling for a quarterback competition. Give Steve a chance. Give one of the young guys a chance. I get it. But there was a reason that Riley Leonard was brought in, guys. Let's not fool ourselves. There's a reason that Riley Leonard was brought in to be the quarterback in Notre Dame, to be QB1. So I have high expectations. Hopefully he achieves it. And if he does, Notre Dame has a chance to be special in 2024. Not good, special. That has that type of upside, and this is why it's a luxury. Notre Dame could have been very good, I think, in 2024 without Riley, but I think Riley gives them a higher upside, gives them a little bit higher of a peak that you potentially get to in 2024. So Riley Leonard, undergraduate transfer from Duke, starting quarterback for Notre Dame, think he has that type of upside. That's the offensive class here, folks. I'm going to get to defense next, okay? But before I do, and we're going to talk about RJ Oben, we're going to talk about Jordan Clark, we're going to talk about Rod Hurd, we're going to talk about Mitch Jeter at the end too, because I wanted to throw the place kicker in there. So I also had a little less to talk about defensively. So we're going to talk about all those guys. Before we do, though, please hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening to me live on YouTube right now, hit that notification bell at the bottom of the screen. Also, if you are on the message board already, a lot of great intel that's going up there at boards.irishbreakdown.com. But if you're not, go sign up today. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform after I've recorded, make sure you subscribe there. Make sure you hit a 5-star review. Make sure you also leave a nice little comment in that 5-star review section on any and all of your favorite podcast platforms. And we'll check you on the next topic here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. All right, folks, let's talk defensively now for the transfer portal for Notre Dame for the 2024 season. So, very interesting class because there are some clear needs for Notre Dame, and I think we'll talk about that, right? And we'll hit on a few of the needs that Notre Dame had. The most obvious, obviously, was safety, was a thin group for Notre Dame. You lose, obviously, DJ Brown, Ramon Henderson transfers this offseason as well. That was a position that you needed to stabilize it a little bit with some veteran help. And Notre Dame was able to do that. We'll get into that name here in a couple minutes. Also, Notre Dame didn't have a ton of proven production at the defensive end position. I think they wanted to find a guy, and I think they did find a guy that at worst is going to be able to come in and say, I've been there, done that. I've had this level of production on the Power Five level. And we'll talk about RJ Oben. Nickel position, you lost Thomas Harper. Notre Dame wanted to obviously take advantage and be able to find a guy that has some experience because they've had a nice little couple years here. I mean, you went from Tariq Bracy to Thomas Harper in back-to-back years, and that was very good. That was very good, obviously. I mean, Tariq's final year before injury was phenomenal for Notre Dame in 2022. 2023, Thomas Harper was very, very solid for Notre Dame all year. I mean, he really didn't have too many peaks and valleys, man. He was just kind of consistently good for the majority of the season, which was great. The you have stabilized the position at Notre Dame from the nickel perspective. Now, and I guess we'll start with Jordan Clark. Why not? We'll start with Jordan Clark because I'm kind of hitting on the nickel position already. The nickel position was going to be interesting if Notre Dame didn't hit the portal because there were a couple guys on the roster that I think are interesting options for the nickel. The clearest two that I would say, one is already played it and the other is kind of suited to play it pretty well. One is Clarence Lewis, who has been kind of rotating between outside corner nickel over the last couple years. Kind of more of he could play nickel, but is Clarence Lewis a difference maker at nickel? I would have my questions there, obviously, because I haven't seen anything substantial the last couple years that I say like that guy is a high level nickelback on the college level. I just haven't seen it. I think that he's a really good rotational player that can kind of work at different spots and be a valuable member to his secondary, which nothing wrong with that. You need depth players. You need guys that have a little bit of versatility on the back end that can play multiple spots. That's where great depth is created. So shout out to Clarence Lewis for providing that. And I think that's a really good baseline for his sake to, contribute to the roster. The other guy that I think would have made the most sense if Notre Dame chose to not go into the transfer portal for a nickelback is Jaden Mickey, who is slated as of now to be one of the guys battling it out to replace Cam Hart. So there's going to be a nice competition between Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray, and both of those guys will play in 2024. And I know Notre Dame is very high on both of those players moving forward in their futures for Notre Dame. But Notre Dame likes Jaden Mickey as an outside corner. Clearly, I don't think that you go and get Jordan Clark as aggressively as you did early on in the portal period if you didn't love Jaden Mickey as an outside corner. Notre Dame loves him out there, right? So you went and got Jordan Clark, who is Ryan Clark's son, obviously former Pittsburgh Steeler. Went to the, I'm mixing up my Steelers, but he was a tremendous player for the Steelers, obviously. True safety. You can follow him. I mean, he's on like ESPN now and all that good stuff. Jordan Clark, he brings, and this is the baseline that we talked about earlier, the baseline expectation. Said he's a veteran, man. He's been there. He played a lot of football at Arizona State, guys. He also played a little bit of safety during his time at Arizona State for the Sun Devils, but he also was a player that played a whole lot in the slot over the last couple years. I mean, he was basically a full-time nickel this year. So he brings a veteran body, because no matter if you would have went with either Clarence Lewis or Jaden Mickey, you would have been pretty inexperienced in the slot. Jaden's played it, but he's not a full-time. He hasn't been a full-time starter at nickel. Jaden has not played it, right? Like Clarence has played it a little bit. Jaden has not played it really in his career at Notre Dame, other than, just some spot duties and times and that type of thing. So you get a player in Jordan Clark that has been there, done that. That's the baseline. You have an experienced player in the slot. Doesn't mean he'll be great. Doesn't mean he'll be good. Doesn't even mean he'll be okay. It doesn't matter. Like there's no level to what the expectations are from a baseline. The baseline is experience. Guys played it. Now, what's the upside with Jordan Clark? And here's my question. I want to hear you guys, right? Because I actually love reading the chat in these shows. I love hearing your perspective on it. Jordan Clark was a very productive football player at Arizona State. Has played a lot of football. He actually has more production overall than what Thomas Harper had at Oklahoma State. Now, that's not a apples to apples conversation because it's two different situations that they're in. And who knows, if they're both on the same, like let's say Thomas Harper's on Arizona State, does that mean that Jordan Clark's now a backup? Does that mean Jordan Clark's moved to safety? Like, I don't know, right? Like those conversations happen. That's why apples to apples, and it's just not an easy comparison to make because they're not in the same situation, on the same coach, under the same coaches, in the same defense, in the same role. It's just not the same. But my question is, can and this would be great, can Jordan Clark be an upgrade over Thomas Harper? And it's no disrespect to Thomas Harper at all. Like I said, Thomas Harper was solid to good his entire Notre Dame career in his 1 year. He was at worst solid. At best, he was good. He was a good player. Just flat out, just good. Could he be more productive? Could he be a better and more impactful football player than Thomas Harper? Could he be? Because again, if you look at the careers before Notre Dame, I would look at, and production doesn't always tell the full story, but Jordan Clark was a more productive football player than Thomas Harper was at Oklahoma State. Just was. And can you now imagine this world? Because I think coverage wise, look, you're going to lose Cam Hart, and Cam Hart was incredible all around football player for Notre Dame this year. He was good in coverage. He was dynamic against the screen game. He was really good in run support. He was just a really good all-around player for Notre Dame this past year. But coverage-wise, I think Notre Dame's going to be fine, man. I look at Notre Dame right now, and I'm like, coverage-wise, with Benjamin Morrison a year older, getting a year stronger, with the other side of Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray, with Micah Bell coming into his second year, with Carson Hobbs, with Leonard Moore, like I look at that secondary and I'm like, that team is going to be able to cover. They're going to be able to cover really, really well, and maybe even be a little bit deeper from a coverage game perspective. Now, what if I told you? What if I guaranteed you in a college football world where space is so manipulated so frequently? We've seen it. The Ohio States of the world, the USCs of the world, the teams that are trying to create a lot of increased space and take advantage of it. What Alabama was able to do with guys like Jerry Jeudy and Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle. What Texas is doing right now with A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and Quinn Ewers. They are trying to space out this field and force you to be in a lot of one-on-one matchups and a lot of terrible situations from a coverage perspective. What if I told you that Jaden Mickey, Christian Gray, assume that they're going to be really good football players? You get a Benjamin Morrison in year 3 to hopefully take a big step forward, which is, you can assume it, right? He's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. He's going to get a year older. But what if I guaranteed you that not only can you have that, but you have a potential upgrade at nickel? You have a Jordan Clark that maybe could give you an even more productive and high-level nickel. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I really don't. I'll be full transparent here, guys. Full transparent. There is a difference of opinion on Jordan Clark on the Irish Breakdown staff. I really like Jordan Clark. I really do. I was more impressed by Jordan Clark's film at Arizona State than what I liked of Thomas Harper's film coming out of Oklahoma State. I liked it more. That doesn't mean I'm going to be right. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be right that he could be an upgrade. But I do think there's a chance, man. I do. I look at him and I'm just like, that kid was good, man. Like, he was a really good player at Arizona State. And again, baseline, veteran, upside, you could have upgraded the nickel position. I think that reality exists. So Jordan Clark, I think, was a sneaky good pickup for Notre Dame. And I think that he will pay dividends for Notre Dame without question. RJ Oben, let's talk about a little bit of defensive ends because, hey, Notre Dame got a big end in last year's transfer portal cycle that ended up being an absolute hit. Of course, that was Javonte Jean-Baptiste, came from Ohio State, was a productive player for the snaps he got at Ohio State, but was never a full-time volume getter with the Buckeyes. Came to Notre Dame. He ended up being a really good player for Notre Dame for his lone year. Really good football player, man. He really was. I was very impressed with what Javonte was able to do in his year at Notre Dame. Now, you're going back to the same strategy. RJ Oben, defensive end out of Duke, graduate transfer, entering his sixth year now, who I thought was going to be in the draft this year. I did. I know for a fact that he had a Senior Bowl invite. No, for a fact, he had a Senior Bowl invite. He was the guy that was going to get drafted. There was no doubt. No doubt. A better draft grade on RJ Oben this year than what Javonte Jean-Baptiste had going into this past year. Just for context out there. RJ Oben, for the big end position, and it's a field end position, however you guys want to quantify it, it's the strong side defensive end in Notre Dame's system. What is the baseline of RJ Oben? I think that because what was Notre Dame's Achilles heel defensively last year? They were great in coverage. They were a little bit inconsistent in the run game, but what part of their game do I believe needs to take a big step forward? They need to have more production from a sack production perspective, from a pressure perspective. They need to be able to affect quarterbacks a little bit more. I don't think that they've been a pretty good pressure and sack team the previous couple years, but this past year they were not great at finishing quarterbacks to the ground. They just were not able to do that. At worst, you bring in RJ Oben, will be your most productive edge as far as a pass rusher and performance in the backfield from a penetration perspective, being able to create havoc in the backfield. RJ Oben gets that to you immediately. Like, there's no doubt. But what's the upside here? I would argue that he could be, I'm not going to say he's going to quite be to the level of Isaiah Foskey, because Isaiah Foskey had double-digit sacks back-to-back years and is the all-time leading sacker at the University of Notre Dame. So I'm not going to sit here and say like he's going to be as good as Isaiah Foskey. But if I told you RJ Oben had 8+ sacks in 2024, and he was just a consistently good player in the pass game, and he was getting pressures, and he was getting sacks, and he was finishing plays in the backfield, I don't think it would be crazy. I think that he is the clearest answer to the pass rush issue you have at Notre Dame right now. You have a lot of talent, but you don't have a lot of proven production. Joshua Burnham could be a stud just from a physical perspective. He can be that guy. He can be that guy eventually. Jordan Botelho, if he gets his weight down a little bit more to what it was at the end of the 2022 season, I think he could be that guy still. I do. I'm not going to count on it. I'm not going to bet my house on it. I'm not going to do that. But could he be? Sure. Sure he can. Absolutely. Could one of the young guns, could a Boubacar Traore, who we saw in the USC game, have a great sack? Could he be that high-level sack artist? Could he be? It's possible. Could we see another young guy be that guy? Could you see a Bryce Young or a Logan Thomas come in and have an immediate impact on the edge position, whether it's at Field or Viper? It's possible. But there's no clear answers, obviously. I think upside-wise, RJ Oben could be that clear answer. Who's the guy that is going to put consistent pressure on the quarterback as an outside rusher? Who's going to be the guy that is going to make big plays on the quarterback in the backfield, make game-changing plays, force fumble, big sack, whatever? Who could be that guy? I think it could be RJ Oben. Why not? Why can't it be RJ Oben? That kid has all the tools to be that type of player. And we saw Al Washington with the last graduate transfer player that he got as a defensive end in the portal, that being Javonte Jean-Baptiste. He took Javonte into a good rotational player at Ohio State to a pretty dang good starter in year one and in 1 year in a higher level of snaps. Why can't he do the same for RJ Oben? And I would argue, actually, I don't even think it's that arguable. I mean, different situations again. But RJ Oben was a more productive player than Javonte Jean-Baptiste was coming to Notre Dame, and he is a more athletic player. RJ is long. RJ is explosive. RJ is a little bendier than what Javonte is. I think that RJ has legitimately just higher upside than Javonte. Not that Javante isn't a good player. I think Javante has a chance to go to the NFL and just last for a while because he just kind of does the little things that you love to see as a defensive end. But RJ Open, I'm telling you, man, like he could be that guy. I think, guys, I wouldn't be shocked. And this is a little bit of a bold prediction, I guess. It RJ Oben, if he comes to Notre Dame and has 8+ sacks with probably the way he's going to test and measure, I wouldn't be shocked if he's a late third round pick next year. I wouldn't be shocked about it. And all due respect again to Javante Jean Baptiste, Javante just had a really good year for Notre Dame, and he'll have opportunities in the draft process with All-Star Game, and I think he's going to East West Shrine Bowl, and then he'll go to the Combine most likely if he gets an invite or the Pro Day or whatever, and he'll have opportunities to raise his stock. But Javante is going to be probably a mid to late D3 football player at best. Nothing wrong with it. Still going to get drafted. Still going to get a chance to play in the NFL. But RJ Oben at his peak, I believe, is a potentially more impactful football player. Game-changing plays. Now, will he do the little things that Javante was so good at for Notre Dame at the end of the season? Setting the edge, being physical at the point of attack, hustle, motor. I don't know if RJ is going to be that type of guy. I have no idea. But he could be a more impactful football player in the area that you need him to be impactful in. That's rushing the passer. That's creating negatives. So I have high upside for RJ Oben, man. I think that he is going to be an asset for Notre Dame. And if he's just a solid player, well, he'll be a veteran voice in that room to help the Joshua Burnhams come along, to help the Brennan Vernons, to help the Boubacar Traore's, to help the Bryce Youngs, to help the young cats be able to take that next step. And I think that you need that type of veteran in the room. So I think at worst, RJ is going to add that, but I think the upside, he could be your top sacker. He could be your top sack artist in 2024. Last defensive player, and then we'll get into the place kicker. Got to end with Mitch Jeter. By the way, just did an interview with Mitch Jeter that we're probably going to air on Friday. Did it last week. Really good kid, man. I like Mitch Jeter a lot. So we'll play that interview for you at some point. But I want to talk about the safety position that Notre Dame upgraded with Rod Hurd. Rod Hurd II, graduate transfer out of Northwestern. So this was a really interesting one because Rod Hurd, okay, people in the chat are ignorant. Rod Hurd played a lot in the nickel for Northwestern, played a lot in the slot, but also played a decent amount in this as a true safety. And I know me and Brian agree on this after watching him. Definitely a better fit at safety. Like there's no doubt about it. And again, baseline. What does baseline he bring to the game? He brings a guy that has played a lot of football, man. Like a whole lot of football at Northwestern. And was very productive at Northwestern as well. 80+ tackles this year. And I believe that at the worst, you're adding a veteran in the room that outside of Xavier Watts doesn't have a veteran. You don't have one. You have a group of Don Schuler, who's very talented, that I think could be a really good player for Notre Dame, but he's only going to be a sophomore. You're going to have Ben Minnick, who again is going to be a sophomore. And then you're going to have some freshmen coming in. You're going to have Bronte Johnson. You're going to have Tabron Benny Powell. You are going to have Kennedy Urlacher coming in as an early enrollee. You're going to have some young guys playing a lot of safety position outside of Xavier Watts. Notre Dame needed to find a veteran there. They need to find a guy that you need to find a guy that that can come in and you have dependability, because safety is a position, guys, where it's like, look, we love the flash plays, and Luke Talich is still on the roster. Sorry, I forgot to mention Luke. I'm sorry, my apologies. Luke is in that conversation as well. But again, another young guy. He's another young guy. Only going to be a sophomore this year. Hurd is going to be a player that I believe at worst is going to provide leadership and communication on the back end for a position that if you are in the wrong position, you're toast. You're going to be off the field pretty quickly. And we've seen it, right? Like we've seen some safeties, young guys who have promise, but just not in the right position all the time. And you need to be able to be that, man, because you are the last line of defense. And in the secondary, I mean, I know there's a couple Ohio State people in the chat, and I don't mean to bring up bad wounds, but 2 years ago in the Michigan Ohio State game, there was a lot of plays in that game that McCarthy was able to make, JJ, in that game, that were just because safeties were in the wrong spot, man. Just blown coverages, just able to just let dudes loose. Can't do that on this level, man. You can't do it. So Notre Dame, I think, has a player that at worst, I believe that Rod Hurd will be in the right spot. I don't know how many plays he's going to make. And I don't even know if he's going to be just the de facto guy for Notre Dame in 2024. I have no idea. But I think I can depend on him. He's played a lot of football. He's been a guy that has been there, done that in the Big Ten. I I just have a good baseline of him being a solid, dependable football player. Now, upside, here's the upside. Could he be better than what DJ Brown and Ramon Henderson were in 2024? I mean 2023? Yeah, why not? I think he's more athletic than DJ, all due respect. DJ ended up being a solid player for Notre Dame in 2023, but could Rod Hurd be more impactful than DJ Brown? Yeah. No reason to think that he can't be. Zero reason. And it's not the same player as DJ because of what I'm saying right this second. He is a better athlete than DJ, and he's been way more productive than DJ as well. So no, it's not the same player. If we're just coining guys that need to be in the right spot all the time, blah, blah, blah. Like, sure, same player, but impact is completely different. DJ Brown was not an 80 plus tackle guy last year. He doesn't have the production that what Rod Hurd has had at Notre Dame. And Rod Hurd, I believe, is just a better athlete than what DJ is. I believe because this is the issue with guys like DJ is that DJ will be in the right spot, and most of the time you won't notice him. Nothing wrong with it, but you won't notice him because he's there, doesn't make a big play, doesn't make a big, a game-changing play, but he's in the right spot. Rod Hurd can be in the right spot, and I think he can make some more plays than what DJ can because he has more athleticism, has more range, and he just has that type of upside. So Rod Hurd, I think, was just a really solid pickup for Notre Dame. Nothing flashy, but I think he is an upgrade over what you had opposite Xavier Watts in 2023. And let's talk about the last guy, the guy that you guys have all been waiting for. Nobody came into this chat today to talk about Riley Leonard. Nobody came into this chat today to talk about the wide receivers. Everybody came here today to talk about Mitch Jeter, graduate transfer kicker out of South Carolina, who is on campus at Notre Dame already, got there last week. That's what everybody came here to listen to. They want to talk kickers, baby. They want to talk about kickers. All joking aside, but Mitch Jeter was a big pickup for Notre Dame. 23 out of 25 the last 2 years, 92% on his kicks, and also a great kickoff, a kickoff specialist for South Carolina as well. He has been a really, really good player the last 2 years. One of the better and one of the most accurate kickers in all of college football. He might have been the most accurate. I don't know. I need to do research on that. Like, I'm sure there's a certain amount of kicks you have to attempt and all that type of stuff, right? But regardless, Mitch Jeter has been a very good kicker in college football over the last 2 years. 92%, guys. 92% of your field goals. It's not bad. It's pretty good. It would be the all-time record in NFL standards. Now, obviously, kicking the NFL is a lot harder than kicking in college, but, regardless, 92% of anything is pretty dang good. Pretty dang good. Baseline expectations, quite simply. I think baseline, he's going to be a more consistent kicker than what you had last season. Last 2 years, really. Blake Grupe did some good things for Notre Dame. Spencer Schrader did some good things for Notre Dame, but they were power legs they were power legs that were a little bit inconsistent from an accuracy perspective, right? Blake Grupe's just kicked 29 field goals for New Orleans, and he's got a pretty strong leg, man. He can get there 50 plus, no doubt about it. Spencer Schrader can get there from 60 plus. He's got a really strong leg. But look at the field goal percentage the last 2 years. It's in the 70s. The highlights are great, but the consistency wasn't. It wasn't great. It was good at times. And I believe that at worst, Mitch Jeter's going to come in and give you a guy that can provide more consistency from a field goal perspective. He might not hit a 59 yarder. He might not be that type of dude. But inside the 50, 47 yarder for the game, I think I would take I think I would take Mitch Jeter over what we've had. I don't think that's a hot take in any capacity either. So that's the baseline. More dependability. Cool. It's a kicker. You want him to be more dependable. That's great. Now, what is the upside? Man, we're talking about upside of kickers on a podcast. What a day to be alive, man. What a day. Could Mitch Jeter be the best kicker in college football next year? Maybe. Who knows? Even if he isn't the best kicker in college football, though, could he be a hidden weapon for Notre Dame? When you come out of a football game, maybe against a really good football team, whoever they're playing, and wow, oh man, Notre Dame won by 3 points today. Why did they win by 3 points? Because in the last 3 seconds of the first half, Mitch Jeter came in and knocked in a 48-yard field goal like it was just effortless, right? Like it was just money. Easy. The hidden points in a football game, the big moments in a football game, could that be Mitch Jeter? Could he be the best kicker in college football? I don't know. But he could be a hidden weapon for Notre Dame and one that they really haven't had over the last couple of years. I mean, they've had good kickers in the past. I mean, you mentioned obviously, a little bit older guys like the John Carneys of the world, but even Justin Yoon was an excellent kicker for Notre Dame and very dependable. But there is going to be a time, I'm telling you, and I don't know, it's probably going to be in 2024 at some point. There is going to be a game where Notre Dame is going to need a big kick down the stretch of a football game tying, game winning, whatever. And I think that Notre Dame is in the best position kicking wise to have a guy that is a clear answer and a guy that you can depend on to make that kick. That's Mitch Jeter. And again, I have an interview with him coming up pretty soon here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, most likely during the recruiting hour on Friday, which is tomorrow. Weird to say. It's been a quick week for me. I don't know if it's been a quick week for you all out there. But Mitch Jeter, another big addition for Notre Dame. With what we had defensively in the portal this year for Notre Dame, what you have offensively and the upside on that side, combined with Mitch Jeter and Jaden Harrison special teams wise, man, that is some nice upside for the University of Notre Dame. So we're going to get to mailbag next, folks. You can throw mailbag questions in at any point. It's just going to be me for the solo show, but throw them in at any point. Before we get there, if you all could please hit that like button on this podcast, make sure you subscribe to the podcast as well. If you're on YouTube or if you're on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe over there, leave 5-star reviews. Tell him Ryan did a great job today. Man, he did such a good job on his solo show because doing solo shows are not easy. He did a great job. Absolutely great job. Leave that review. Would be very much appreciated there. Also, Boars@IrishBreakdown.com. I've had a bunch of updates because it's a big recruiting weekend for Notre Dame. If you all didn't know, Junior Day this weekend. So there is some players coming to campus. There's a cancellation that I just reported on this morning. Unfortunately, that will not be able to make the trip this weekend. There's a lot of intel and content on there. Coaches on the road this week, obviously in the open period as well. So if you want as much intel as you possibly can, please be sure to go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. Going to get to the mailbag next, folks. Thank you all for joining for me for this section of the Irish Breakdown podcast. All right, yo, I got some coffee in me, guys. I'm ready to go here. You get to see this beautiful face. You don't have to see the screen with the transfer portal options anymore. We're getting into the mailbag right now, folks, and I got some caffeine in me, so I am ready to rock and roll. So hopefully you guys have some great questions out there. Let's get into it right now. First question, and again, super chats obviously go to the front of the line. So if anybody wants to throw a super chat in there as well, feel free. But again, mailbag questions, throw an MB before the chat. Very much appreciated as well. We're going to start out. Oh, so actually, I lied. Tommy Guns, I know you're out there. I was going to start with you, but got to always start with super chats, man. And Jim Halloran just threw one in there. So I want to make sure that we get his super chat up first. Jim, very much appreciate the super chat, my man. It's very much appreciated. Just says, welcome back, Ryan. Thank you all so much. Thank you all. For people that haven't been following, I haven't been on the show all week because it's been weird. It's been a weird time in the Roberts household. Yeah, I don't know if I really I've been debating on like whether to share what's been going on with me. I know there's one person in the chat right now that was texting me about like what the heck was going on, but it was just a weird week in the Roberts household so far, and I guess we'll leave it at there for now. I mean, it's not like super embarrassing, but it was weird. It was a little bit of sicknesses running through the household, not related at all, but yeah. But thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be back. I'll be back tomorrow for the Notre Dame recruiting hour as well and the foreseeable future, obviously. So thank you, sir. Always very much appreciated. Do tell, do tell. I'll tell. Fine. All right, quick story. This is not Notre Dame related at all. This is not football related. Okay. So every year, story time with Ryan. I hope you all are ready for some story time. So every year, I buy some merchandise from college athletes to try to support the NIL stuff, right? And it's not just Notre Dame centric. I always buy merch from, you know, I have a Clark Phillips hats on right now. Actually, no, I'm sorry. This is my Josh Downs hat. I have a Clark Phillips hoodie. I I I try to spread the wealth a little bit. You know, as soon as players were able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, I was trying to support student athletes. Is basically what ended up being. So I recently had bought a hoodie for a certain very good defender that is not Notre Dame related. I don't want to put the name out there because I don't want to slander their name. But I got a hoodie on this past Saturday. Okay. So Saturday morning, put on this hoodie. I'm like, cool. It's a really nice hoodie. Like we went down to the kids like touch museum thing down in Delaware, took the girls down there. And about 5 o'clock that night, I started feeling super itchy. I'm like, what the heck is this? So my arms got super itchy, right? And I'm like thinking, I'm like, did I get a bug bite or something? And it was kind of a weird situation, right? So I took the hoodie off, put a different hoodie on, I showered and I was just like, that's really strange. Later that night, still a little bit itchy, but I was trying to be a tough guy and I was like, I'm okay. Maybe it was just a bug bite or whatever. Wake up the next morning, guys, I'm covered in welts, like covered in welts. I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, what the heck? Because I have never had any skin issues in my life. I had chicken pox when I was a kid. Otherwise, I've never had an allergic reaction to anything skin wise. Never had it, but I'm covered, right? So I go to the CVS near me. I get Benadryl and I get some ointments. And I'm like, what the heck is this, man? So I broke out terribly. And so eventually my wife is like, you need to go to the urgent care because it just kept getting worse. Like the Benadryl wasn't working. I was like, what the heck? So it turns out I went there and because I was actually got like a fever at one point too. Like it was gross, man. Like it was not great. So I go to urgent care and they basically come up with that, like whatever that material was or whatever the dye was in the hoodie, whatever, I was severely allergic to it. Like severely. I've never had that happen to me in my entire life, man. It was like when I tell you I had hives everywhere, guys, like I had hives everywhere. I'm not going to get graphic here. I'm not going to show any pictures or anything, but like chest, arms, legs, everything. And I had like a fever. It was wild, man. It was wild. And then after I'm recovering, my daughter also has pink eye, and it was a rough few days, man. It was gross. It was so weird. But yeah, so what happened to Ryan? What was going on with him? I had a terrible allergic reaction to either a material or a red dye in this hoodie. And I actually messaged the kid that hoodie it is because it's a pretty prominent football player that's coming back in 2024. And I messaged him. I'm like, dude, stock down. Like your draft grade just went super down. You guys can't even make a hoodie, my guy. You can't even make a hoodie. I actually did message that to him. And obviously fully joking there, but like that was a weird turn of events. But obviously I'm good now. I'm fine. No fever, no hives. I'm good to go here. But Jim, thank you. So that was story time with Ryan. I hope everyone appreciate that. So story time over. Jim, thank you so much. Let's get into some question here, folks. Thank y'all. All right. T Guns, Tommy. Which portal player other than Riley Leonard No relation? What? What does that mean? Will have the biggest impact on the season? That's a great question, Tommy. That's a great question. So I would like to say for me, oh man, it's actually a pretty tough one, man, because there's three guys that came to mind, to be honest with you. There's three guys. One is Chris Mitchell. Two is RJ Oben. And three is Mitch Jeter, actually. Like it is. I would end up picking Chris Mitchell because I feel pretty good about where Notre Dame's going to be from the slot position. I mean, the combination of potentially having Jaden Greathouse out there, having Jordan Faison, and then you look in the boundary, having Bo Collins, having Jaden Thomas, having those big body pass catchers as long as they're able to stay healthy. I feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty good about it. But who is going to be the guy that's going to create explosive downfield plays? Who's going to be the guy that's going to create explosives? I don't have a great answer for that right now. Like, I think RJ could do that at times. I think Jordan Faison could do that in his role. But as an outside oriented player, I mean, it could be Cam Williams, but Cam's a true freshman, so it's tough, right? So I look at it and I say, I believe that Chris Mitchell could have that type of effect and be able to be that downfield explosive threat for Notre Dame. And if he is, completely changes the dynamic for Notre Dame, doesn't it? I mean, you just haven't had that guy enough over recent years. I mean, just really haven't. A guy that can just consistently take the top off from the field. Haven't had that guy a ton. I haven't had that guy enough. There's no doubt about it. So I'll go with Chris Mitchell, but honorable mention to RJ Oben because for what I talked about in the breakdown, I think RJ could be the best pass rusher on Notre Dame in 2024. And I think Mitch Jeter is going to have some clutch kicks potentially for Notre Dame. So those are a couple answers that I was also thinking about, but I'll go with Chris because I think that his impact and his upside can open up things offensively that it was just look, offense in 2023, it was just too condensed at times. It just was not able to open up consistently for a myriad of reasons. One, offensive play calling at times, one quarterback play at times, three wide receiver plays. It was all a part of the conversation. So I think that Chris Mitchell gives a dynamic that Notre Dame hasn't had enough of. And I'm excited to see if he's able to create a little bit of a different dynamic. All right. It's a great question though, Tommy. Way to get us kicked off, man. And you had a few that were out there, Tommy. So I'm gonna try to get to some of yours later here in the podcast, man. But like a couple of these, I'm like, I have no idea what you're actually asking me. So yeah, we'll get there though. Jake Rustman said, Ryan, if you had the Bears' number one draft pick, do you take Caleb Williams or trade down and stick with Justin Fields and put some talent around him? Folks, I would love to hear your insight on this as well, because I know as Notre Dame fans, there's a lot of Chicago people in here, right? A lot of Bears fans with obviously the geographical pertinence to where Notre Dame is. Me personally, what would I do as an outsider, as a person that is not a Bears fan, as a person that also doesn't watch Bears every single week? I watch a decent amount because I feel like the Bears are always on TV for where I am because they're just a national brand. And they're I know it hasn't been great recently, but they are a historical team, all that type of stuff. I would take Caleb Williams. And I would use Justin Fields as a trading chip in this class. Whether that is another first, whether that is a couple day two picks, whatever it is, whatever you can get out of Justin Fields, that's what I would do. For a couple reasons. One is, and this is just from a draft perspective, right? I had a higher grade on Caleb than I did on Justin Fields. I liked Fields as a player, but I had some reservations about him, which is a lot of the same stuff that keep popping up in his game from what I've seen in Chicago. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong if you completely disagree about this, but there was a lack of consistency in the pocket, the ability to kind of understand what's breaking down, what isn't breaking down, getting the ball out quick, just kind of that natural internal clock of when to get the ball out. And then it was consistency, being able to read backside reads at Ohio State. That was my qualms with him. He was great. 1-2, could get the ball out and could do really well. When he had to do 1-2 and then work backside, it was inconsistent at Ohio State. I just didn't love it. Just did not love that part of his game. But that being said, he is a great athlete. He is a big time talent from an arm strength perspective. I understand why Chicago would want to stick with him because he's a very talented kid. There's no doubt. For me personally, though, you have just went through year 3 where I think you needed a little bit of clearer answers for me because what's going to happen now is that Justin Fields has had some time and he's had some production at times. And now you're going to hit a moment where you need to make a decision pretty quickly here on is he your long term or is he not? And he's not going to be one of those guys that's going to be fighting for $50 million a year, but he's still going to be a quarterback on a second contract, guys. That's young. He's still going to demand a pretty nice little chip of money. He's still going to demand that. Your quarterback window is shrinking if you're Chicago. And I look at Chicago and say, I don't think they're so far away that it's like, you would need to, just stockpile picks over the next few years. But I still think that they're a couple years away where I don't know if the winning window of Chicago as a football team and the winning window of Justin Fields as a quarterback are going to mesh. Because what happens as soon as you give Justin Fields big money? It limits your ability to put assets around him. That means there's less money to be able to allocate into offensive line help, into wide receiver help. You're limiting what you can put around him. You're limiting that. And plus, I don't really like the coaching in Chicago. I know you guys got rid of Luke Getsy. I get it, sure. But I'm just not a believer in the head coach either. I'm just really not. So I believe that for the long term of the team and resetting that quarterback window to not have to put big money into the quarterback position for the next couple of years, Caleb Williams is the better answer. And I also think that it helps that Justin Fields, I think, will have some trade value because he's still young. All the things I just tried to sell you on of why it would not be the worst thing if he stays, a team will see that and a team will gamble because there's not enough good quarterbacks in the NFL right now. There's going to be a team that is going to mortgage at least a couple day 2 picks to be like, hey, we'll take Justin Fields. We'll give it a shot. But there might be a team out there that says, we'll give you a first round pick for him. And in that case, you got another asset to put around a new quarterback in a less expensive window. And I just also believe, and this is the big question mark. I have hesitation about Caleb Williams for a couple different reasons. As a talent, I don't have much questions. He has one of the most talented arms I've ever evaluated. He can throw from multiple platforms. He can make some throws that just not many people can make. I mean, when he gets in the NFL, there are going to be a couple throws that you're going to see that you're going to be like, there is probably Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and maybe Justin Herbert, as a small sample of quarterbacks that can make that throw. Just not that many. He's got rare arm talent. He does. Ability to throw from different angles and throw from multiple platforms and from a bad base and still be able to make a lot of great throws. He has that type of upside to him. Really like Caleb's talent. He's also a little bit of a magician outside of structure at times. He can make things happen that you just don't think are possible at times. Now, the setbacks to Caleb is I want him to be more willing to stay inside of structure. I want him to be good call, Jason, by the way, on Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford is one of the more talented throwers that has ever existed. Incredible talent from a throwing perspective. I want Caleb, though, to be more willing. Hey, Caleb, you need to be able to work inside of structure more effectively and more crisply and not just vacate the pocket all the time. That's my concern mainly as a football player. My other concern is I have questions about the support that's around Caleb from a support system, not football wise, but just some of the things that people coin as character flaws, which I kind of pushing back against a little bit. I believe that it's more about the people that are around him than actually Caleb. And sometimes that doesn't matter. Sometimes it does. The people around you can sink you at times or they can raise you. And I think it's more than likely that the people around Caleb Williams, unfortunately, will probably sink him than will help him, will elevate him. So there's a couple question marks I have about Caleb Williams, but I still believe that you take the gamble on the higher level talent. And I believe as a thrower of the football, as a passer on the next level, Caleb Williams has significantly higher upside than Justin Fields. Now, he's never going to run for 1,000 yards in a season. I don't agree at all with that last comment. He's never going to run for 1,000 yards in a season like a Justin Fields. But as a thrower of the football, he's special, man. He's special. It's not going to be a talent issue that's going to hurt Caleb Williams. If he's not successful, it's going to be a support system issue around him, in my opinion. That's going to be the main thing that I think could really set the downfall. That could really set the downfall of Caleb, unfortunately. Folks, this might be a message board topic, but if you knew some of the stories I've heard about the Caleb Williams support system and some things that are demanded behind the scenes and some things just conversationally right now, you probably roll your eyes a million times. Like, it's wild, man. Some of the things I've heard from that camp. There's for people that don't know, my roots are in the NFL draft space, but I'm also in the consulting space in NFL draft. Like, I work with a bunch of agents to recommend players for the next level and find value and all that type of stuff, right? And do evaluations. But man, there has been some wild things I've heard about Caleb Williams, and not always just Caleb Williams, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know people want to throw shade at the fingernail stuff, but like no one cares about that, man. No one at the next level actually cares about that. Yeah, we'll see, we'll see. But again, my main point though is that I have a couple question marks, but I would still reset the window because I think that you can get into quarterback purgatory sometimes where you just kind of hit stagnation. And I unfortunately think that's what you can do. That what can happen with Justin Fields, excuse me, because it's not that Justin's not a good player. It's that he is this good of a player where if you put a big number into him from a contract perspective, can he elevate the people around you? You're seeing that stunt some growth. I remember when Carson Wentz got his big contract, that stunted the Eagles for a couple years. I think that's actually going to happen again with the Eagles here. I think they put a lot of money into Jalen Hurts, who is a good player, but is he worth $40+ million a year? I don't know. Right? So you have to be careful with who you put big money into at the quarterback position because that is less money to allocate to other parts of your roster. So, yeah. So we'll see. We shall see. All right. Let's go to next question here. BK Month, who says, how long does it typically take for a quarterback to adapt with his wide receivers he hasn't played with? I mean, it's a great question, BK. I think that it's not a number for everyone, right? Like there's some guys that can acclimate quicker. There's some guys that it takes a little bit longer. I think having I think it's important for Riley because I think this question is obviously talking about Riley Leonard and his maturation. Riley's already on campus, right? He's already there. He's going to be thrown with his guys in the off season and extra reps, obviously going into the spring, into the fall. There's going to be a lot of reps. One thing though I'll say is that getting timing in practice is a whole lot different than getting timing in a game. So I still think you need to give guys a couple games to really feel out, understand spacing, understand timing, understand different processes of running routes as far as tempo as well, because there's going to be guys that run different variations of routes depending on what coverage they're looking at. Like all those sight adjustments, like those things are all going to take a little bit of time. So I would say full off season, give it a couple games, and then you should be able to be acclimated at that point. There's rarely ever a player that I would say game one, they're good. Like they don't need any more timing, help or whatever. But it really depends on just this off season is going to be big. How often are they throwing? How much trust is there in the camp this off season? And I just think that there needs to be a little bit of a united front, but I think that that's not going to be an issue after the first game or two of next season. All right, so let's get next one. We had a similar question, Joe, so I'm not going to spend as much time on this one because I think I answered one that's like, kind of similar, but which player from the portal, who do you think will have the greatest impact? I mean, it's hard for me not to answer Riley Leonard if he's on the table. Tommy asked a similar question, but he said aside from Riley Leonard, so I went to Chris Mitchell and threw out RJ Open's name, threw out Mitch Jeter's name. But if you're asking me like who is going to have the most impact, it's got to be the quarterback, right? I mean, I just spent like 5 minutes talking about the importance of hitting on quarterback if you're the Chicago Bears, and the quarterback position is not the most important position in football. It's the most important position in sports. Like there is no position that matters more than the quarterback. So who needs to have the greatest impact? It needs to be Riley Leonard. It needs to be the quarterback position. If it's not, then you probably weren't as good as you thought you could be, right? Like if you leave and you're like, Chris Mitchell was great, Riley Leonard was only good, then you put a little bit of a cap on how good you can be. You put a little bit of a cap. This has to, if Notre Dame is able to hit their upside as a football team to what they can be in 2024, it has to be a no doubter. Riley Leonard was the most impactful player we got in the portal last year. Most impactful by far. Has to be. That has to be the conversation you have. Hopefully it is. Again, I mean, there's a reality, and it's a very fair question, Joe. Like, there's a reality where he's not. And I think that's where you kind of put a cap on your team. But needs to be. If Notre Dame hits their upside, it needs to be Riley Leonard is the most impactful player, the greatest impact that you got from the portal this offseason. Great question, though, man. Great question, Joe. All right, let's go to another question. Let's see. Sure. All right, Tommy, let's get this one out of the way, man. Like, all right. T-Guns, yes or no? Do you believe in the following items? Ghosts, aliens, skinwalkers. Oh, Ouija boards. I always forget that's how you spell Ouija boards. Man, again, I would love to hear people's insight into these, man, because unfortunately, there's a couple of these that just aren't easy answers, right? Because we don't really know. Do I believe in ghosts? No, not really. The spirits, maybe. Ghosts, not really. So I'm gonna say no to that one, Tommy. Do I believe in aliens? Yes, I believe in aliens. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think I have fights with, so it's a peek into the Roberts dynamic here. I have fights with my dad about this, not fights. I have back and forth with my dad all the time because my dad is a very close-minded person. That's like, there is no such thing as aliens. There is no such thing. There's no other life out there. We're the only ones. And in my perspective, this is just my opinion. Again, no one is proven right or wrong here because we have no idea, right? But I think it's very unlikely, Occam's razor, I think it's very unlikely that out of the billions of planets that are out there, billions, that this is the only planet out of billions of planets that has life. The only one? It's hard for me to wrap my mind around those odds there, right? It's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. So yes, I believe in aliens. Do not believe in ghosts necessarily. I'm kind of like indifferent on it though. Like maybe, I don't know. Skinwalkers, no. And Ouija boards, no. I think Ouija boards are fun. It's cool in movies and stuff, right? But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big believer in that. So my only yes to that list, Tommy, this is the weirdest question you probably have ever asked me on this podcast. Aliens exist. Yes. Everything else, Well, I would say the last two, I say no. Ghosts, maybe. I don't know. I haven't thought about it that much. When I come in contact with one, Tommy, I'll let you know, man. I'll let you know. All right. Actually, Tommy, how about this? You don't text me. Don't text me until I see an alien. I'll text you. All right. You don't text me until I see an alien. I think people understand what I'm saying there. Don't text me. Just kidding. Obviously, Tommy. Just joking. All right. Let us go now. Great question, question mark. I don't know if that was a good question or not, but there it is. All right. We had Jim Halloran who had a question. He said, Ryan, Jim, how many players entered the portal after spring practice? Well, as of right now, as of right now, the scholarship, I believe it's still at 90. So there's 90 players that are still on the roster that can come back next year that haven't made a decision out there, right? So you need to get at least 5 guys off the roster. At least. I mean, simple math there, right? You need to get at least 5 guys. I also wouldn't be shocked if after the spring, Notre Dame, when they do their evaluation, if they want to bring in a couple guys either. So there's going to be a few, man. Like Brian talked about this already, but like there's guys that are on the scholarship chart right now on the scholarship board, like Andrew Kristovic, for instance, that we don't anticipate coming back, but he hasn't said yes or no one way or the other if he isn't coming back, for instance. Devin Ford's another one. Is Devin Ford coming back? He can if he wants. I don't know if he is. Like, there's a couple of those guys, right? So we'll see what the exact numbers. But are there going to be transfers after the spring? Yes, there will. I guarantee it. 100%. Yes, there will. What the exact number is, we'll see. I want to see first and foremost the spring roster. How many of those guys that we're talking about are kind of like in the air, the 6-year guys and such? How many of those guys are still on the roster going into the spring? There's going to be a couple guys that come off there in general. And then how active does Notre Dame want to be in the portal after spring practice as well? So that can, then that will kind of fix it up a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Good question though. Good question, Jim. There will be. I would be very surprised if there was not transfers after spring. Be very surprised. Tommy, I'm bringing this one up. I just want you to answer it for me and I'll take it down. He was asking about Tampa's coach, about his plan to prepare for teams playing in elements. I did not see this quote, Tommy. So if you want to give me a little bit of heads up of what that means, then I'll bring your question back up. Okay. You did have another question, though, which I'll get to for the time being. Tommy said, do you believe in the expression that there's no such thing as a stupid question? Yeah, for the most part, I do. Yeah, I do. I was a teacher for a while. And I think that I learned most through my career as a teacher was that you never truly understand people's experiences. I'm talking about kids, obviously, here, right? But you don't know what a kid has learned. You don't know what a kid's experiences are. You don't know what their expertise level is in certain areas. There are some things that you learned very early on in your life that someone else just may not have. They didn't have the same experience as you. So for the most part, no, I don't think there's stupid questions, right? There's inexperienced questions. There's ignorance questions, and not ignorant in the sense of like complete ignorance of like, wow, that's really like inappropriate what you're saying, and I can't believe you're saying that, and whatever. Like ignorant in the sense of like you just don't know. You don't know the answer to a question. So for the most part, no, I don't believe that there's stupid questions. I don't. I think that people just learn different things in different ways and aren't exposed to certain things. So there might be questions out of ignorance. There might be questions out of just unfamiliarity. But for the most part, I don't think they're stupid questions. Could be maybe more well thought out, sure. But stupid, I pull away from that. I pull away from stupid. Stupid's just kind of, I don't like that term. I don't really like that term, especially teaching kids for so long. I feel like kids get framed so easily, and I've learned this from the education side of things. They get framed so unfairly because they can't change who brought them up, who brought them into this world, and the experience that they had throughout their life. They can't do that, right? That's a support system. That's the people around you. So no, I don't think there's stupid questions. I think there's unfamiliarity, and I think there's ignorance, which is a different thing, obviously, than stupid. Good question, then, Tommy. It's actually a really good question, man. We had a question from Nicholas Grosh. Said, should or could we make a run at some of the Alabama portal guys? I mean, look, no, if I'm Notre Dame, I'm doing my due diligence in the portal always. Always. So the players from Alabama, the players from Washington, the players from Arizona that are entering the portal right now, am I at least looking? Yes. And I believe Notre Dame will as well, right? The window is going to be a little bit differently now, obviously. But would I at least entertain it? Sure. Caleb Downs is in the portal. Would I look at Caleb Downs? Yes. Do I think Notre Dame's going to get Caleb Downs? No, I don't. But would I look at Caleb Downs? Yeah, heck yeah. Keon Keeley enter the portal. Would I look at Keon Keeley? Heck yeah. If Jonah Savanea, offensive lineman out of Arizona, who is a kid I love, if he enters the portal, would I look at him if I'm Notre Dame? Heck yeah. Yeah. If Tyrion, actually, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, if he entered the portal, would I look at him? Heck yeah. I would look at him all day, man. Parker Brailsworth, interior offensive lineman out of Washington. Center's not necessarily a need for you if you're Notre Dame, but would I at least take a look? Yes. Yes. Do your due diligence, man. Absolutely. Someone said Caden Proctor. I'm not sure I would go after Caden Proctor. I saw Caden Proctor in San Antonio last year, and I thought he was super overrated. I'm just not that high on Caden Proctor. But that's another conversation for another day. But would I at least think about it? Would I at least look at Caden Proctor? Sure. I would look at him. I would look at him. You also have to understand that because there's a difference between looking at a player and going after a player, right? There's a big difference. Would I look at them? Yes. Doesn't mean that the fit's going to make sense. It doesn't mean that they would even want to come to Notre Dame. It doesn't mean that they would be able to take the next step in getting them to come to Notre Dame. But would I look at them? Yeah, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt, right? There's no doubt. So would I talk to Caleb Downs? Yes. Would I talk to Keon Keeley? Yes. Would I see what if Keon Keeley does enter the portal? Would I talk to Jonas Savanea? Sure. Washington. I don't know if there's anybody else that I would really take a look at. I mean, all their wide receivers are going pro, but the McMillan kid out of Arizona, would I look at him? Sure. Yes. I would. I would take. And yes, the question Shaquille Oatmeal. Yes, Caleb Downs is an alien. Literally an alien. That kid was not made on this planet. There's no way that a kid just went into the SEC as a true freshman at 100 plus tackles and did what he did at the safety position, man. He is incredible. He's incredible. So if I was Notre Dame, would I look at him? For sure. Is Caleb Downs coming to Notre Dame? Probably not. Probably not. But yes, I would look at him. I would definitely look at him. And there might be another player that I didn't even mention that is in the portal now from Arizona, or that's going to go in the portal from Alabama or whatever, that maybe would make more sense, right? Like, and so, yes, I'm always doing my due diligence, man. I think that people that don't do due diligence as a program are the ones that are going to fall behind and falter in the end. I believe that will happen. So, yes, do your due diligence. And guys, remember when I told Tommy not to text me until I see an alien? Well, he's texting me right now, and I'm about to block him. But that's another conversation for another day as well. Let's get back to the Irish Breakdown podcast here. Tommy, stop texting me. Let's knock this one out real quick. Terry Tyler. Terry, I think you're in the message board. Are you not? I could be wrong. I thought you were, though. A site is saying Mike Mickens might go to Cincinnati for a defensive coordinator job if Notre Dame doesn't give him a better title at Notre Dame. Well, if you're on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, you would know. I'm not going to go super in depth on it, but you would know that that is not a true report. It's not. It's a false report. It's a false report. So no, we do not anticipate Mike Mickens leaving to be the defensive coordinator at University of Cincinnati. Do not see that in the cards. I mean, could things change? Sure. But yeah, just go to the message board, Terry. If you're not on the message board, sign up. We had a post about it yesterday. And yeah, so yeah, not a concern as of right now. All right, let's go to a question from RJ Gerving. Says mailbag. What is the breaking point on transfer portal as coaching changes open special portal windows with potentially destructive levels of transfer? A better system is needed than a portal circus. I mean, RJ, I feel like at some point it's going to implode, man. I do. I really believe that at some point the Wild West is going to cause implosion. It's going to. I just don't think it's sustainable. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just really, when I look at where the college football is right now, I just look at it and say there's got to be a point where you hit a spot where there's just too much activity, there's too much volatility, and this thing blows up. Either that or no, or there's going to be mandates at some points, or hopefully the NCAA at some point. I don't expect this to happen, but eventually they will make a change that says like, hey, we see where it's going. We're going to try to stop it before it happens. So I don't know exactly where that point is, RJ. I don't. But do I think that it could get worse before it gets better? Yes. I don't think that it's still the tip of the iceberg right now, in my opinion. We have not seen what's underneath the water yet. This could get a whole lot worse, guys. I mean, it really can. The money that I'm hearing thrown around at the transfer portal, the money I'm hearing for the pay for play for schools to get kids to come back to school and not go to the NFL. The tampering that is happening behind the scenes, the transfer portal is making it easier to tamper. It's making it way easier because now you can hide behind it and call it NIL. You can call it NIL. You can just do whatever you want now. I think it's going to implode at some point, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't think it's sustainable, but I could be wrong. But I don't know when the breaking point is, RJ. I don't. But eventually, I think it's coming. I think it's going to come. But we shall see. All right. So we're going to go now to a next one. We had Josh Miller said, Ryan, I've seen some mock drafts that are absolutely laughable. What are the reasons for even putting out such weird drafts? How does ranking Caleb Williams the 10th best quarterback make a name for you? Oh my gosh. Josh, I know what this is. I'm assuming Josh, and I don't know if you're in the chat right now, but I'm assuming this is a Twitter conversation, right? Because I actually shared this this ranking of quarterbacks from a person who claims to be a former NFL scout. By the way, he's not. He was a scouting assistant, which just got coffee for everyone. He didn't actually do any scouting for the New York Jets, but another conversation for another day. Look, there are two different types of people that fit this label. Okay, these people. One are the people that are just purely out there for engagement and clickbait. And some people are out there. There are going to be plenty of people that rank Caleb Williams down lists because they're just going to be like, oh, I just don't see it. And in reality, they're just trying to create some conversation. They just want people to click on their article because it pays them money. And you know how that works. I'm sure you guys have been on clickbait sites before. I have written for a couple in the past. So yeah. But then there's other people who is this individual that we're talking about that I think is where this conversation is coming from. There are some people that I just think are bad at their job. Honestly, because I've seen this guy put out work and I know that he actually does work. He does the film work. Okay. He does the film work. He does the evaluations. He grades it up, all that type of stuff. I don't think this individual that you're talking about that kind of leading from this conversation, I think is a clickbait guy. I just think he sucks at it. Honestly, I just think he's bad. And I hate the NFL draft space because I love NFL draft. I love evaluation. I am a scout at heart. I am. I love it. Love it. But there are too many people that get into the space because this is what they hide behind right here. Ready? Oh, it's subjective. Scouting's subjective. And my reply, and I replied to this on Twitter the other day. Yes, scouting is technically subjective, but hit rates and the ability to be more consistent on it still matters, right? You can't just hide behind the subjectivity of scouting. Either you have a good eye or you do not. Either you have one or you do not. I knew a person in the NFL draft community from the Twitter space that was a well-respected person of draft Twitter that told me that KJ Hill, who's an former Ohio State wide receiver, was a 4.3 athlete. He goes to the combine and runs 4.61. And I'm like, guy, there is nothing with subjectivity here. You just don't know what you're watching. You just don't have an eye for it. If you can't watch a guy and say he's fast or he's not, or he has a strong arm or he doesn't, or he has a good core strength or he doesn't, then you just suck at it, right? Like that's all it is. If our difference of opinion is I value this type of player more than you do, or that fit with that team more than you do, that's where subjectivity comes in, right? That's subjectivity. But if you can't look at a 4.6 runner and you think that he's a 4.3 runner, if you do that, then you just suck at it. You're not a good scout. You're not a good scout. I mean, that's what scouting is. Scouting is being able to dive in, look at individual traits and grade them out and tell you what you have. From there, it's up to the team scouts to say that fits our system and it fits what we want to do as a coaching staff, scheme-wise, and our program-wise. And then there's obviously the personal background stuff that makes evaluation even harder. Being able to know the person and being able to know what makes him tick and what his work ethic is and what his family life is and how committed he is. And there's a lot that goes into scouting. There's a lot that goes into it. But the core is, can you look at a player and you dissect the talents? How fast is he? How explosive is he? What is upside as far as development from a physical perspective? What weight can he put on with sacrificing athleticism? There's a lot that goes into scouting, but if you can't do those things, then you're probably not good at it. It's all right. You don't have to be good at it. I mean, just kind of where you are though. All right, let's go to man. All right, we'll do this one real quick. NFL question. T Gun said, "My ride guy, don't call me that. Which wild card round blowouts was the most and least surprising to you, including the Packers game, since it wasn't anywhere near as close as the final score might suggest?" Well, Tommy, what was the most and least surprising? It's a great question. Yes, like saying that, Eric. Thank you. So, was that a shot at me, by the way? I don't know if that was a shot at me or not, because I didn't say he was going to run a 4-3, but yeah. All right. So my least surprising, actually, I'll go with most surprising. I did not see the Houston Texans. I did not think the Houston Texans were going to blow out the Cleveland Browns. I thought that was going to be a close. I thought it was actually going to be a close contest. I actually thought the Cleveland was probably going to win that game. I just thought rookie head coach D'Amico Ryans. I thought rookie quarterback CJ Stroud. Although I love where that program's going, I'm just like, usually rookies in their first game, first playoff game, first big moment like that, they usually falter a little bit, right? They usually come down to reality. And I just thought Cleveland's has some veterans. I know, you just dusted off the corpse of Joe Flacco and made him solid for a few weeks, but I just thought that experience level would just be a little bit more ready to play. I did not see Houston doing what they did, man. They destroyed Cleveland. Like, it was bad. And it was a full-on onslaught. It was like pick sixes defensively. It was CJ Stroud was unconscious in that football game. Like, it was decisive, man. So that was one that I was surprised at. I actually picked the Green Bay Packers to win Dallas. I picked them to upset them, but I did not think that it would quite go that way as well. I I thought it would be a close football game. I did not see Dallas just getting throttled like that. And obviously Dallas, scored some points in garbage time and Dak and all that type of stuff. But if you watch that game, you know that Green Bay thoroughly whooped Dallas in that one. So that one wasn't. Both those games were a little bit surprising to me. I'm trying to think if I would say any game was like super. Okay, here's one. I wasn't necessarily in on the Eagles winning their playoff game. I already forget who they played. So they lost 32-9. Who they played somebody not great. They played Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay, I thought Tampa Bay had a chance to beat the Eagles. Like, I thought they were probably going to beat the Eagles, but I did not believe that they would blow out the Eagles. Because I know the Eagles were like kind of a wounded animal coming into that game. They hadn't been playing great football, but I just didn't really think that highly of Tampa Bay either. Like, I thought they would just kind of be an ugly slugfest a little bit, like a lower scoring game. Tampa Bay whooped them, man. They whooped them. So that was probably my most surprising. I think the other two were my little bit of least surprising. So yeah, yeah, I think that's what I would say. It was a lot of blowouts in the first week though. I hope that we have a lot more. I hope we have a lot more good football in week 2 and beyond, because I don't like watching blowouts, man. Like, I I'm a Rams fan, so unfortunately the Rams season ended this past week as well. So I I really, at this point, I just want to see good football. And there was just a lot of blowouts, and it was just kind of this. I was disinterested with some of the games. Like, I watched them, but I wasn't like, yeah, can't wait to watch that football game. Like, it was a lot of games where I was just like, man, this is kind of ugly. It's kind of ugly. I don't really like this that much. So, yeah. All right. We had a question here from Peter Kinnickles. So, Peter, I'm sorry if I'm saying your last name wrong. Please correct me in the chat if you are still listening. How productive would Jordan Faison have been if he played 13 games? I don't know. I mean, if he played all 13 games, if there difference between playing all 13 games and being a a guy that you are counting on in 13 games, right? I mean, I think if you're saying what you saw at the end of the season, if you saw for 13 games, probably a 500 plus yard receiver. I mean, I still think there's going to be some games where he's not the focal point of the offense and like that type of stuff. I'm more interested to see what Jordan Faison does this year, though, because he's the known commodity now, right? Like he's a guy that that you're going to potentially count upon in the slot this year. And the conversation I started in the first section of this podcast, where I talked about who is potentially the number one receiver for Notre Dame in 2024, Jordan Faison certainly in that conversation. Certainly. I mean, he was your best receiver the last game of the year. He was your best receiver. He showed a lot down the stretch that gets you really excited. So I'm more excited to see what his production is for a whole season as a guy that you know now. It's going to be really interesting, man. I'm going to be excited to see it. We had a question here from Andrew Gilmore who said, who is the fastest wide receiver on the team? Great question. Fastest wide receiver on the team right now. So the guys that I think are in the running are Jordan Faison, who I just said, Jaden Harrison, who's the transfer from Marshall. Cam Williams, I think, will be in the conversation at least. Trying to think if there's any guys that like I'm missing clearly. Like I think those are probably and Chris Mitchell, I would say, is probably somewhat in that conversation as well. I would say Jaden Harrison. I mean, I've heard that Jaden can run like it. I've heard that he runs somewhere high 4.3, 4.4 flat, like somewhere in that ballpark. I would say that it's probably Jaden Harrison. If I had to bet on it, I would say that Jordan Faison's probably a 4.4 something runner, like 4.48, 4.47. Like he's got good speed, obviously. Cam Williams has been timed electronically in around the same range. I believe that Chris Mitchell's probably in the same ballpark as well. But I don't know if there's any other player that I would say is more like a 4.3-ish type of athlete. So I would say Jaden Harrison is probably the fastest receiver on the roster, which makes sense why he's a kick returner, right? Makes plenty of sense. He's a guy that can create big plays, can hit the seam and get it going. So, yeah. We had Jim Halloran who also said, what's your trust in Riley Leonard to get them the ball? If he's healthy, I trust Riley Leonard. I do. Jim, I understand why there's hesitation and why there's question marks about Riley Leonard. Obviously the health this past season, but I really think the context matters with some of this inconsistency stuff, man. I really think it does. I really do. The wide receivers for Duke are not great, guys. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you right now. His top receiver from a receiving yards perspective, I think, was Jalen Calhoun. Jalen Calhoun, from an NFL draft perspective for a second, the only invite he got was to the Hula Bowl. Like, he's not going to be drafted. He had no wide receiver on his roster this past year that is an NFL player. Not a single one. Not a single one. So I think that there's going to be an upgrade in talent around Riley Leonard. I think there's going to be an upgrade as far as bigger windows to throw to. Everything was a tight window this past year for Duke. Everything. So I think I have trust in Riley Leonard. I'm excited about it. Everybody knows here that I've been a Riley Leonard fan now for a couple of years. I think that he's going to do great things for Notre Dame. But at the end of the day, we will revisit this. So my favorite function on Twitter now, or on X now, is that you can bookmark things so easily. And, we'll revisit it, right? If I'm wrong, come with it, Jim, right? If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, don't forget it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So let's do that. But I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. All right. Oh, we already answered that one from Nicholas. Nicholas, thank you again for that one about the transfer portal stuff. All right. We had Nicholas Gross who also said, how many Alabama portal guys were originally recruited by Notre Dame? Would they be easier to get them admitted into Notre Dame? I mean, some of the young guys wouldn't be hard, right? Like Caleb Downs, Keon Keeley. If I know Keeley hasn't entered the portal, but like in the theory he did. I think he would be like those guys that are not too far along in their coursework where it's going to be hard to transfer a bunch of their credits, like those types of guys. I think you can make that work. But, I just don't know what the interest level is going to be from some of those guys. But, so who was recruited by Notre Dame? Out of just off the top of my head, obviously Caleb Downs, Keon Keeley. Trying to think. I don't know if there's a ton of guys on that team that I would say were like recruited by Notre Dame, like off the top of my head. I just don't think there was. So, yeah, I'll get a little bit more in depth with you next time, Nicholas. I'll probably do a little bit of a breakdown as far as like, the teams that are losing portal players, like how many of those guys are even Notre Dame targets at one point. But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. But I know there's going to be a lot of conversation about some of the Alabama guys, obviously, because there's a lot of guys entering the portal. I think Arizona's over 10 already. So there's some guys entering the portal, man. It's not going to end there. It's not going to end. Archer with a question said Texas A&M has had 23 guys enter the portal and have brought in 23 transfers. Do you expect those numbers to be more normal whenever there is a high profile coaching change? And the second part to that was, and if so, do you think that may change some schools' minds on firing a coach, potentially keeping a guy for at least another year instead of blowing up their roster? Archer, I think with what the transfer portal is right now, I think it's going to get blown up regardless. Just do, like I don't think no matter if you keep a coach 1 year short or 1 year long, like, I don't think it's going to affect it as much. Like I just don't, man. I think that rosters are probably going to be volatile until there is a change in the transfer portal dynamic. Just do. Do I think that it's going to be similar? I think it's going to be similar-ish. I mean, is the number always going to be 23? Is it always going to be a max exodus? Is it going to be lower numbers? I'm sure. But I do believe that you're going to supplement in the transfer portal the best you can, and it's probably going to match a lot of what you lost, right? Like that's easy, right? It's supply demand. And as you lose those players, you're going to try to supplement that talent the best you can. But I think in the most case, as of right now, until there's a change, yes, I think that it's going to be a higher number. Like Arizona's going to lose a lot. Washington's going to lose a lot. Alabama's going to lose a lot. Texas A&M, as you mentioned, has already lost a lot. And you're going to supplement that through the portal. That's going to be the supply and demand, I guess. But yes, so I think there are going to be higher numbers for now. If there's ever a transfer portal change, then maybe those get reduced a little bit. But I do think that there's going to be high numbers like that, man. It's just so easy for guys to enter the portal now. Like it just is. So yeah, until there's some type of mandate or restrictions or whatever, like it's not going to change anytime soon. All right, answer that one about Mike Mickens. Again, if there's any questions about Mike Mickens and job offers, go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. You'll be able to check out the latest there as far as there's not much to be concerned about as of right now. Chris W. with the question, will you ever go on Ruffino and Joe? No, probably not. I actually joked with this. So people that don't know, Ruffino and Joe, I know most people in this chat hate Blake Ruffino because he's an LSU guy and he talks a lot. He does a show though with my good friend Joe DeLeon, who I actually do a podcast with in the NFL draft space, which is pretty funny. But I actually joked with Joe like 2 weeks ago about coming on Ruffino and Joe, and he was like, "No, you're not allowed." And it's obviously because back and forth and whatever. And I don't have any feelings towards Blake. Like I think some of the stuff he says is misguided about Notre Dame, and he talks about Notre Dame fans always having BK in his mouth, but it's like every time something happens, he talks about Notre Dame. It's just like, you're kind of contradictory there, but whatever. Another conversation for another day, I suppose. But yeah, but no, I don't think I'll ever be on Ruffino and Joe. I don't think I'll ever be on that show. But yeah, Joe DeLeon does good work though. Ruffino, I mean, I think he does quality work for what he does, but yeah, obviously he's not a Notre Dame guy. Not a fan. Not a fan of the Notre Dame people around here. Right. We had Lucky Ducks 512 says, if Rylander is the first round pick in next year's draft, what does Notre Dame's season look like? Notre Dame is in the playoffs for sure. Notre Dame has potential to win a championship in 2024 if Riley Leonard is a first round lock during the season. If he's looked at as a guy that is definitely one of the best quarterbacks in college football, which is telling me what that projection would be, and he's viewed as a first round pick, then Notre Dame has a chance to win a championship in 2024. That's what I believe. I think that they have a chance to win it even if he's not. But if he's considered a first round player during the seasons, they're like, whoa, that dude's a first round dude right there. Then I think they definitely make the playoffs. Like, no doubt about that. But I think they have a chance to win a championship. I think that type of upside exists. All right. We had a question from Ant_VR. Why does it seem Notre Dame is never in the picture for big name portal guys? Example, Caleb Downs, Caden Proctor, Bonds. I don't even know who Bond is. Is that wide receiver for Alabama? I don't know. I get that these guys are likely looking to get paid, but Notre Dame pulled Sam Hartman, Riley Leonard in the last 2 years. Well, I think there's a lot that goes into that, Ant. One, they might just not be overly interested in Notre Dame. Some people aren't. Two, does Notre Dame have a need at the position that they really feel like if it that it means pushing for? There's the money thing that you talked about. Riley Leonard and Sam Hartman got paid, or well, excuse me, Sam Hartman got paid, and I'm sure Riley Leonard will make a lot off of his name, image, and likeness while he's at Notre Dame. But it's a different pitch than what some schools are getting at. Okay, it's different. Sam Hartman came to Notre Dame, and through the right avenues of NIL, made a lot of money. But some players do not want to make money that way. Some players want, give me that money right now, and then I'll come. It's the difference between NIL and pay for play. It's the huge difference. They just want that payout immediately. Some players want that. And I would say this is that some of the money that these guys are getting up front before they even come to campus is outrageous, man. I'm telling you, I've heard some numbers this offseason where I'm just like, guys, that's not sustainable. Even for these bigger programs that have like a $20 million NIL budget, like it's still not sustainable, man. It's still not. It's going to crumble at some point. But regardless, some guys want that. Other guys don't like the cold. Other guys want to just coast and don't want to go to class. So there's going to be some guys that aren't fits, right? I think Caleb Downs would be a fit at Notre Dame, which is why I'm sure Caleb Downs would at least give it a second of thoughts. A second. Doesn't mean that he wants to come up and play at Notre Dame. But Notre Dame is still doing a really good job in the portal, man. Like I just spent they pulled in a guy that at one point was considered a potential first round pick in the NFL draft in 2024 if he didn't get hurt. They pulled in an 1,100 plus yard receiver. They pulled in a Bo Collins, who's the most consistent receiver for a Clemson team and a former high caliber 4-star. Like Notre Dame's pulling in some talent, man. Yeah, they're not going to get Caleb Downs. I don't even know if they'll go after Caden Proctor, but regardless, like I'm okay with it. I'm okay with Notre Dame doing it the way it's doing. Okay. If Caleb Downs wanted to come to Notre Dame, I'd be like, yeah, heck yeah, brother. Like really good football player, obviously. But there's just a lot that goes into this, man. There's a whole lot that goes into this, a lot of layers to this onion. And unfortunately, just some guys just aren't going to make sense. But we'll see who does make sense. And that's the guys that I want to win with at Notre Dame. All right. We had Jim Halloran who also said, Ryan, Notre Dame has never won a natty without an All-American defensive end. Who has the potential to be an All-American defensive end on 2024 team? In 2024, I think the guys that have that potentially, and again, there's a big jump that needs to be made. But I think RJ Oben's the easiest one that you look at and say that's the guy that can make the easiest jump because he has the most proven production and he still has upside to the table. Joshua Burnham, I think, has that type of upside. Will it be in 2024? I don't know. Bryce Young has that type of upside. Will it be in 2024? Most likely not. Does Boubacar Traore have that type of upside? I believe so. Will it be in 2024? Probably not. So I believe that if you had to ask me who is the most likely, I would say RJ Oben is the most likely. Do I think that he will? I don't know. I have no idea. But does he have the most upside of the group in 2024? Just in 2024? Yeah, I would say RJ Oben. That'd be my answer. All right. So we had Ida Minami who says we will have 3 first or second team All Americans on the defensive line. True or false? True for me. Man, 3? I'm gonna say false, Iden. Because like, hey man, I love Howard Cross. Could he make an All American list again? Sure. Riley Leonard, I think, is a good player. Is he quite an All American level player in my opinion? No. Maybe, but no. Do I think RJ Oben could be an All-American? It's possible. But again, I mean, we're talking about potential there. And if you're asking me 2 to 3 of those guys need to do that now, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Does one guy make an All-American list? Yeah, I think they can. Maybe 2? Maybe. I don't know, though. It's just too much of a jump for me right now. I think the question would be more like, how many defensive All-Americans do you have? Because then I can bring in Benjamin Morrison. I can bring in Xavier Watts. And like that conversation becomes a little bit more exciting, right? Like 2 to 3, I think that's just a little bit much for my expectations right now. But I hope I'm wrong, man. I hope I'm wrong. All right. All right, we got Tommy said some weird pun about Jeter, which I think was in comparison to Derek Jeter. Andy Milton fan, do you suspect Notre Dame is going to the portal in the fall, or are they done? Probably Milton. I think that Nathan. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame after the spring reevaluated where things are, and there's maybe a couple defections, a couple guys leave for the portal if they do their due diligence there. So I would say yes. I think that they may be active in the portal before the fall, after the spring. Yes, I think that's possible. All right, we had a football question here from Matthew Kettner who says, "What's the difference in jobs between the Will linebacker, Rover, and the Mike linebacker?" So I would say that. All right, so just a quick breakdown of all of them because there's obviously a lot of responsibilities and they're kind of becoming dwarfed, to be honest with you, or they're kind of becoming a little bit blurred because I mean, I'm talking to like Anthony Sacco, who's a 2025 linebacker last night, and they're basically inventing new linebacker positions, which are just hybrid roles, right? Like it's wild, man. It's really, really wild. But just in the baseline of what a Mike, a Will, and a Rover do. A Mike linebacker is your middle linebacker, strong side, inside linebacker. If you're playing a 4-2-5, their responsibilities are first and foremost, you are the main communicator of a defense. You are typically the most physical inside linebacker. So you are a guy that's more downhill physical. So set the calls, make sure you have good proper gap fills, run fills, and be able to be physical working downhill. That's the main responsibilities of a Mike linebacker. Will linebacker, weak inside linebacker, if you're in a 4-2-5. They are more space oriented players. They play in pursuit a lot more. So there's not as much working at the point of attack against blockers. It's more about working from the backside and working space. You're, of course, going to work at the point of attack at times, but it's more about pursuit work. Rover is basically in a old 4-3 alignment as a Sam linebacker that has just been flexed out more. So think of it this way, a 4-3 team that goes against a spread team, that Sam linebacker is now getting put out in space as an overhang player. You know, the kind of that space between offensive tackle and inside receiver. They basically become that guy that kind of splits the difference. His responsibilities are to play in space a ton. You're going to see him work against the screen game. You're going to see them work off the edge a little bit. You're going to see him reduce down against run fits as well. And then also when they're in heavier alignments, you're going to see him move inside as a true Sam linebacker. So the strong side linebacker in that system as well. So on that front side, setting the edge, working things back inside to your extra help. So there's a lot there. So hopefully we can do a podcast this offseason about the direct responsibilities and maybe we could diagram things, do some whiteboard stuff. I would love to personally do that stuff because I am a defensive guy. So I would love to break it down a little bit overall. But yeah, that's basically the breakdowns. Again, Rover, hybrid Sam linebacker, basically play it on space a whole lot more. Got to play off the slot a little bit. You got to play pass coverage a little bit more. Mike linebacker, physical communicator downhill. Will linebacker, weak side linebacker, working in pursuit a whole lot more. A guy that's going to be navigating space from the backside of plays. And that's about as that's abbreviated, obviously. There's a lot of responsibilities, excuse me, that each position have, but that is the abbreviated version of it. All right, let's work through a few of these a little quicker. We got Jordan Pinero says over under on more commitments in the month of January. So public or I mean, my first question would be: are we talking about private? Are we talking about silent commits, or are we talking about public commits? Because I think look, I'll put it this way, Jordan. I'll put it this way because obviously it's Junior Day on Saturday, or this weekend, excuse me. And I think that that's where this question's coming from, right? Of all the guys on campus, how many are going to pop, all that type of stuff. I would say we'll set the over under on commitments from players. Actually, no, let's do it this way. The way you're asking. How many guys this weekend are going to silently commit to Notre Dame? Ask me that question, right? All right. So that's the question. How many guys this weekend are going to silently commit to Notre Dame? Not necessarily go public, but give them that, right? I would say I would set the over under a 2.5 for this weekend. Overall, I would say that there's going to be several players that are going to be on campus this weekend that end up with the University of Notre Dame. Several. Well, decent list. But I would say 2.5 over under for this weekend. I could see 1 to 2. I could see 3. Like it's possible, man. Notre Dame's in a good spot with several of the guys that are going to be on campus this weekend. So set the over under 2.5, and then you guys let me know over or under. Might take the over. It's crazy to say. Like that's a lot for one event, but Notre Dame has a chance to they have a chance to close on some dudes this weekend, man. We'll see if they do, but they got a chance. They do have a chance. All right, I believe Tommy Guns. Man. Oh, Tommy sent me a vid. Tommy, I'm going to answer that question later about the Tampa thing because I don't have an opportunity to watch a video right now, man. I don't have an opportunity to watch a video. I'm on a podcast and you want me to watch videos, man? You're crazy. Crazy, dude, man. Crazy. All right. We have Jeff Luke. Any secret recruits coming on campus this weekend? And his name, Keon Keeley. I don't anticipate Keon Keeley being on campus this weekend. Any secret recruits? No, not that I'm aware of. I have put a list out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I will also have a preview tomorrow morning of the weekend visitors. And so I do not anticipate there being any secret, any secret attendees. I know last season, during the season, there was a game that Carter Nelson was at that he was a little bit of a secret for the USC game. I know that Nandi Akboko was for a game that he was a little bit of a secret player on campus that Notre Dame didn't want their names to get out there too much. But as of right now, just truthfully, no, not anybody that's. I mean, we already reported on one guy that is cementing a trip, but hasn't fully cemented it. I mean, but like that's not a secret either. You can find that at board.breakdown.com if you haven't already. So nobody's secret as of right now. What is happening right now? What is happening? Oh, someone asked publicly. Publicly in January, I would say maybe one, maybe, as far as guys that pop this weekend that are going to commit because what you have to understand about this is that this isn't just a Notre Dame thing. When multiple guys commit to a program, or there's a few guys like a couple silents at a time, they don't do it all in like a day span or like a couple days span. Usually they space out a little bit because again, there's graphics that need to be made. Maybe there's a video that needs to be made. They just kind of want to, spread out the great news type of thing. So publicly, I'll say maybe one in January, but silently, I set it at 2.5, man. Set it at 2.5. That's a great question, though. And I don't know what people are talking about in this chat. We haven't gone off the rails once. I don't know what you guys are talking about, man. I have kept cool, clean, and collected and on targets in this podcast right now. No idea what you guys are talking about, man. No idea. No idea. And yes, Brandon, I'm hoping that it is cooperative as well. This weather this weekend, but it's going to be cold, man. It's going to be cold. So shall see. We had Jordan Pinero also said, where do you think Tommy Rees will land? I think the easiest one's LSU, right? I haven't heard anything about this though, honestly. I just think the easiest transition would be LSU. I don't honestly know where he's going to end up, but back with his good old boss would be my guess as of now. But I have no inside info on that one. Jordan also asked if there are transfers on campus as well. Yes, all the transfer portal guys, to my knowledge, I don't think there's anybody that had to wait until after the semester. I believe that they are all on campus. I know Riley is. I know Mitch Jeter is. Bo, I believe, is on campus. Chris Mitchell's on campus. The only guy I haven't seen pictures of is like RJ, but I think they're all on campus. I think they are all on campus. All right. So we had a question from Aiden Benami. Says, what does Riley Leonard need to improve on the most this offseason? Whispers. I would say, the most obvious one is just being able to get back to full health and be able to maintain his health this offseason. Want him to come in, obviously feeling good physically. From a football playing perspective, I think that there are times where Riley doesn't trust what he's seeing all the time. And I would like that to be a main thing that we work on this offseason as far as developing that trust and that chemistry with the team in the room. I would also say the other thing that I think Riley struggles with a little bit is I think his base gets a little narrow at times. I'd like to see just kind of work on that base. And that's the good thing about Gino Guidugli is that one thing he talked about very early when he came to Notre Dame was he doesn't like to mess with the upper body mechanics of throwing the football because everyone throws differently. But he does really harp on the lower body mechanics. And I just think the lower body mechanics stuff of Riley Leonard, I think would be nice improvements to the offseason as far as just being crisper and more consistent, improving the base a little bit more, and then staying healthy. Those are the biggest things that I would say. All right. So we had JK, I think it's, PK said about Justin Fields. That's why the J came in there. Justin Fields sacked 135 times in 3 years. Don't know if we have seen his best by far. Could be a Lamar sooner than Caleb would develop. I mean, maybe, man. Like, I'm not necessarily out on Justin Fields. It's just the situation. Like when I was talking about the Justin Fields versus Caleb Williams thing earlier, it's not any shot against Justin. It's really not. It's where you are comparative to paying a quarterback a big contract potentially and where your winning window is as a team. Like when those things don't mesh, they don't mesh. Like that's a part of the conversation of paying a guy, right? Is like, it doesn't make sense for your franchise. Justin Fields has been sacked a lot. A lot of that is Justin Fields' fault. I don't think he has great pocket awareness. I don't think he feels pressure incredibly well. And also, didn't you guys just draft this great right tackle last year? I don't know, right? Like, why is that sack number not coming down? So I'm just not sure that Justin's that guy. I could be wrong, and I still had a first round grade on Justin. I didn't dislike him as a prospect, but I do have my concerns. And if you're asking me, is resetting with Caleb better than giving Justin a big contract kind of soon here? I'd probably reset with Caleb, especially because I think Justin does have some trade value. So just my opinion. And I don't shoot the messenger, PK. Could be wrong. Could be wrong. And I hope that Justin is good, but I have my concerns, man. I do have my concerns. All right, so let's get to another one. Another one. Agree. Doesn't see the field very well. I 100% agree. Josh Buff with a motivational business banker. Ryan, in your opinion, is Riley Leonard a better quarterback than Sam Hartman? Stats and years on the earth aside. I think that he's a much more talented quarterback than Sam Hartman. Guys, if you remember last year when it first came out about Sam Hartman, I had to talk myself into Sam. I think Sam was a really good college quarterback, but like there are just some things where is he an elevator? I wouldn't say so. Like he's a good player, to really good player when things are good around him, when he's comfortable in a system, when he has good wide receivers, like it's cool, right? Do I think that Riley Leonard has a chance to be a better player than Sam Hartman in Notre Dame? Yes, I do. So I think his talent level is higher. I just think he has more upside. I do. So we'll see again if I'm right. I don't know if I'm right, but shall see. Throwing hands Ira said Malik Zaire said that Alabama could easily go 8-4 next year with their schedule and everything they're losing. What do you think about that, Ryan? I want to see first and foremost what portal additions they bring in. Because the interesting part about Alabama is someone posted their projected starting lineup next year of guys that are still available that haven't entered the portal, and it's still really good, guys. Still a good team, still a talented team. The problems that you get with the portal stuff that's happening right now is the depth issue. Like you're just going to have less guys to pull from. But I also don't know what the portal is going to look like. Like Malik might be right, but I don't think that it's fair to make that determiner right now because I don't know who they're going to bring in. It's still Alabama. Yeah, you don't have Nick Saban, but you still have money behind you. You still have the brands. I think that Alabama's still going to be able to recover here. So I think it's just too early to say stuff like that, honestly. Show me what the final product looks like. Show me what the depth chart looks like. Because one thing I know is that although Kalen DeBoer is not Nick Saban, there are going to be some parts of his team that are going to be improved compared to Saban's, right? Am I as positive that the defense is going to be really good at Alabama moving forward? No, not positive there because Nick Saban was a great defensive mind and obviously a great recruiter. But will the offense be better in 2024 compared to 2023? Possibly. It's possible. I know they're losing some guys, but just a better offensive mind is going to be leading that room. A better offensive play caller is going to be leading. So I think they have a chance. We'll see, though. We'll see. We had a question from Patrick Fitzgerald. Any idea when the 2024 schedule will be finalized? It's just the one game that we're waiting on as far as like that schedule to be finalized. I'm not 100% sure about the date, but Patrick will keep you updated when we have more information on that. Tommy Guns, Miami tight end Cam McCormick just got approved for his 9th year to play football. Did he really? I didn't see that one. Yet Talia Tungavailoa, whatever, couldn't get a 6th year. Why? Talia was petitioning for a 7th year, not a 6th year. So out of the realm. I don't know the specifics. I know Cam McCormick's had like a million injuries, so I guess that's why, right? But I don't know enough about I don't know enough about both situations. I know Cam had a million injuries though, and he missed several seasons, so I guess that's why. But I don't know. But yeah, Talia he was fishing for his 7th year, not his 6th year. So yeah. All right, let us go to. I think there's only one or two left. I'm going to get to here because. Oh yeah, we'll get that one. Jordan Panero just said, Ryan, do you have who do you have in the Tampa Bay versus Detroit matchup? I got Detroit. I think that Tampa Bay looked good last week against an Eagles team that I think was just checked out. Like they were just done on the season. So I think Detroit's going to send them back to reality a little bit this week. So give me the Detroit Lions there. Let me see if there's any other questions that I wanted to hit on before I get out of here. Let me see. I think that's a good way to end it. So, folks, tomorrow we're going to have the recruiting hour. We're going to do a nice little breakdown of the weekends. We're going to preview some of the big recruits that will be on campus, the key targets for junior day this weekend. So make sure, if you're not already signed up at bourse.irishbreakdown.com, I have everything you need there as far as who's going to be on campus, what's on stake, all that type of stuff. I'll also have the free content, obviously, at irishbreakdown.com tomorrow. Make sure you sign up, though, at the message board there. Thank you for joining me live on YouTube. Make sure you hit that like button before you leave. Subscribe to the podcast. Hit that notification bell. If you're listening to me after the live show, make sure hit that like button again on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Subscribe to the podcast, and 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Might have a special guest as well tomorrow during the recruiting hour. But thank you so much again for joining me live here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. See you all tomorrow.